do have to leave, if you do have to leave, just let us know in the chat and we'll figure it out. All right. Hey, everyone, we're live. Welcome to the round 7 of the Instructors Roundtable. This is a little bit different than what we normally do. This is normally you're going to get an intro from me and we'll introduce the instructors. But we're in the middle of the International Law Enforcement Training Summit right now. And everybody here on this panel, less one person, our special guest is an instructor on the summit. And I won't say why Dr. Lewinski didn't agree to be a speaker, but that's between him and I, and we'll talk about it later. Just kidding. So today's an interesting session. We're going to focus mostly on use of force and defensive tactics, kind of a rollback to the very first roundtable that we had. And in fact, we have one of the gentlemen, Scott Savage, on here with us, who was on our very first inaugural roundtable. And Mr. Tony Blauer will be joining us a little bit later as well. So we're going to rehash some of that. And then we also have 5 other experts on the panel here. So if you have any questions, any comments, or anything like that, you can please feel free to reach out in the chat, say hi, ask us questions. And here's the thing. It can be anything about the summit. It can be anything about what we're talking about. It's really open season. If you want to ask Scott what his favorite thing to do is on a first date, please feel free to do so. There it is. There it is. And as you can tell, this one's going to be a little bit more loose than our standard roundtables. And just because we want to really have an open discussion here about this. So one thing I do want to bring up, of course, is that this roundtable is sponsored and supported by Force Science, which is obviously we have a lot of Force Science instructors on the summit, which is fantastic. And we have Dr. Bill Lewinski joining us as our special guest. Thank you so much, sir, for taking the time and joining us on this discussion.
Thank you for the invite, and it really is a pleasure to be here with your esteemed panel as well. Great people. So it's an honor to be here. Thank you.
Yeah, awesome. Absolutely. I mean, here's the thing. We're at what day are we at? 3, 4?
4.
Is it day 4 already?
Yep.
So we have 1 day left. Oh, good. Okay. I don't even know. I haven't slept in a week. Day 4, we've had, I'd have to bring up the numbers, but we have over 55,000 hours watched of video on the summit so far. That's crazy. We have over 10,000 people on the summit, and so each person on average is watching over 5 hours of video. And so I'll let you guys fight about whose videos they're watching. I won't tell you because I think that'll be fun to find out at the end. We'll have a little private discussion and see who won and who lost. But with that, we have a lot of conversations to have, and we've had a lot of instructors and sessions on use of force, defensive tactics, a lot about training and methodology, and a lot about how do we implement the correct types of training. And obviously, we have everything that's happening right now in the world. We have the questions about what's happening in New York. We have questions about what's happening everywhere else. And I know one of the things that is an excerpt of one of the sessions that people didn't get to see was Lon and I, when we did his recording, we actually had a brief discussion about what's happening in New York. And I think Jason and I did as well. And so where do you guys want to start? I'm going to just open it up. Anybody here, if you have questions, please ask in the comments. I'm also going to be giving out 10 all-access passes for free during this roundtable. And so we're probably going to do some, I don't know, skill testing questions, or, I don't know, make you go grab something from your house somewhere and first person show me a picture of it wins or something. I don't know what we're going to do. But I'm going to give those away. And then also, Force Science has graciously given away 2 full passes to their new and upcoming de-escalation course that's being developed right now by our friends at Virtra. So I'm really excited for that as well. So stay tuned, and we're going to be giving those away later in the show. So who's up? Who wants to start this thing off? Anybody have anything top of mind that they want to talk about?
I'll go.
All right, Jason, you're up.
So obviously, with this group here, we're facing some of the most prolific changes to the profession, maybe in its history, when we see what's going on throughout the country, and some concerns that have come up as an active law enforcement officer as well as a trainer. is removing certain tactics that are in our cadre that we've put together over years and years of formulating programs and providing active law enforcement officers with resources to use in the hands-on process, but as well as the de-escalation process. And I think from this group, especially to add to my knowledge base, I'd be interested to see what the comments are when we're starting to remove some of the tactics that we've taught throughout the years, including any kind of carotid neck restraints, taking away OC, tear gas, and really limiting the officer's less lethal force capabilities when we're faced with not only protests and riots, but just calls for service on the street. And I don't know how it's going in your areas, but you know they're popping off all over the country, and certainly in my jurisdiction. And there's a lot of concern with active law enforcement now on where do we move forward from here. I'd like to maybe start that off and get some input from everybody in the group.
Yeah, I guess my biggest worry is when you start eliminating options and narrowing things down, do we run a risk now where we're going to see things escalate faster? Because in most of my career, I didn't see a lot of excessive force. What I saw was not the right amount of force at the right time to control the event, to not let it spin out of control, and then higher or more intense levels of force had to be used. So if we take away some of these lower levels, these low risk, I'll call them low risk uses of force, then what do you have left? And that's, I guess, probably one of my biggest worries.
My concern is that, and I hate to start with a distant comparison first, but a distant analogy, is that our school systems have really failed us. Because when we look at what the public is doing, they're confusing correlation with causality. And that is a basic error in science. If somebody has something happen to them and they die, we look at the relationship and attribute a causal purpose to it. When really we have a correlation. And that correlation may have a myriad of causes that are connected to it. So we have an incident in which someone dies and a VNR is applied, and immediately it's attributed to the VNR, or it's attributed to some body position. And immediately there is pressure on the community who sees the correlation, doesn't understand the cause, and then attempts to link those two and eliminate whatever behavior they believe caused something. So I see it as a failure in the public to understand police use of force, and in particular, the profession to not have a science foundation for what we do and be able to talk to the press and to the community about what we do. For instance, there's I think a fairly good body of research about weight on a torso. And we've just seen some reaction to that. No connection to the research at all. But attributing a cause to the weight on the torso creating death. And we know that doesn't necessarily happen. And we don't know the stats about that either. And it's because we don't have a science on what we're teaching, how we're teaching it, what the effect is in the real world. In fact, I know of no profession that is driven so little by an evidence foundation. And that's beginning to bite us because we cannot engage the community who A, doesn't understand it, but B, we cannot cut through their fog of anti-science because we don't have the evidence to provide that other than our experience. And so it's something I'm very concerned with because we will end up, as Jason said, replacing good techniques with things that actually create a higher likelihood of injury.
I think Dr. Lewinski touched on a huge, important thing that law enforcement for a long time has been struggling with, and that's kind of controlling our own narrative. You talked about we're not pushing a lot of information out there, and I think we as an industry could be doing a whole lot more right now to explain and try and educate the public on why we do certain tactics, why certain things are safe versus others. And I think as a whole, you don't hear a lot of that from police. We kind of tend to stay quiet, and I think maybe we should be defending ourselves a little bit more on this through education.
Yeah, I obviously agree with everything that was just said, and I think there's two different things going on, right? So there's the conventional narrative that's in the media right now is not necessarily focused on efficacy or change, I suppose, or being effective with what we're doing. There's folks grabbing onto things that sound intuitively like make a lot of sense. So if I say, hey, do you think we should ban chokeholds, put body cameras on police officers, send them to de-escalation training, and a few other sort of things you hear every time, most people intuitively would say, yeah, that sounds like a great idea. And I think from an instructional standpoint, we all kind of raise our hand and go, is there some research to back that up, that's the thing to do that will fix the problem that we have? Have we defined what the problem is? There's sort of a difference between something that sounds like a good idea, that sounds like that would work, to something that we can prove would work. And it kind of like the doctor said, that it's just amazing, right? That police work, this is the most high liability, most important, I think, career field in the world where the most things go wrong. And it's the only career field where you walk around and have a gun on your hip and you make the decision sort of who to shoot and who not to shoot. And yet our training really isn't based on science, In the other sort of life-threatening fields, before I was a policeman, I was a paramedic, and kind of everything we did was based on science. And here's the studies that show give this medicine when these symptoms appear and that stuff. But we are, from a training standpoint, we're thinking about what would actually work and then how would we deliver that. But the conventional thing that's happening right now with the police critics and in the media has nothing to do with that. That hasn't entered into the conversation. It's a very different thing. It is a sort of public relations thing or an emotional argument. I don't like what I saw on that video, and so I think here's what we should do. We should defund the police, or we should make them go to de-escalation training, whatever that is. I think every cop should wear a body camera, and we should be able to watch it. There's a great study that just came out. I'll put it in the chat, and then maybe, Adam, you can throw it on the live comment section, but it's called Moving Beyond Best Practice, Experiences in Police Reform and a Call for Evidence to Reduce Officer-Involved Shootings. And the researchers, again, this is research and this is science, so it's not stuff that may be very popular with police critics. They don't want to have this argument, but what they did is they took the top 5 things that folks seem to always say: body cams, de-escalation training, reducing chokeholds, and a few other things, and really started to show where there is science and where there's not. And some of the studies, such as body cameras, said, yeah, it's great to have body cameras on, but there's no studies that show that's going to change behavior of the officers. So if that was your goal with saying that we need body cameras, there's no research to show that. So I think from a training standpoint, we're all just about let's change our career field and let's change training, but let's make sure there's research to back that up before we invest all kinds of time and energy into doing it.
Yeah, Scott's totally right. I think we rely so much on anecdotal research, and we hear about it. We hear about something that worked, and so we jump on it without any sort of scientific backing behind it. I see that so often in training.
There's a question here. I just put it up. I'll put it up again. It said, ultimately, the decision versus a tool or technique is the starting point of the event. How do we evolve the training of the decision paradigm or decision maker?
Great
I
question.
was just speaking to someone earlier today that one of the largest police departments in North America, at the time when I was looking at their training, made one deadly force decision in training, and that was using a FAT simulator. One. And they're one of the largest police departments in North America at the time. And their training, by the way, total number of hours is less than half of what's required to be a barber or a cosmetologist in that city. And so what Dr. Black had to say is really very true. If this is a profession that truly is clinical, meaning we do an assessment, we think about what the problem is, which is diagnosis, and then we implement a solution, which is prescriptive. Law enforcement really is a clinical profession. And one of the most important and most frequent things officers do is make decisions. And if you looked at the number of decisions that they made in the academy, and considering that 2/3 of police officers don't get an FTO program, they get something, but it's not quite an official FTO program. Most officers have very little actual decision-making in their training, which is kind of pretty serious in a profession that is decision and evidence-based, and they have to prove why they did what they had to do and how it comports to law and policy. And so that's another deficiency. I don't know if it's been noted earlier, but Dr. Black certainly has pointed that out to us. Decisions are really critical and the key to great performance. How do you read a situation? How do you understand the schemas? How do you diagnose it? How do you understand it? How do you understand what might work there? Where do you build that knowledge? Because right now, our training programs in the academy don't drive that process.
There's a question that, sorry, go ahead, Bill.
And we've done a study in 3 countries, the UK, Canada, and the United States, and that is deficient in all 3 countries. And yet, when officers screw up and are blamed for it, it's usually in that decision process. It is not so much in the application of the tool.
I would even take, one step further is even maybe as a society, and I don't think any of us think we can change society, but maybe as a society, let's decide on what we'd like the police officers to be really good at. Let's kind of come up with what we think, the police should be very good at. And one thing inevitably is going to come up is dealing with resisting suspects or, taking someone into custody who doesn't want to be taken into custody. And then let's take a hard look at, okay, you want that up on the wall? Let's do that. And anything else? Criminal investigation. Okay, well, let's do that as well. But let's have a really short list of what you'd like the police to be good at, because I can tell you, this is my 21st year of being a police officer, and every year it's one more thing that they'd like us to be proficient at. And I guess I'm waving the white flag and going, I'm sorry, I can only be good at X number of things. It's not an unlimited number of things. So, we've become experts or gotten training now in terrorism response, and now we're giving Narcan to narcotic overdoses, and here's what to watch out for human trafficking, and oh, by the way, now you're going to be sort of a CSI expert and you're going to take DNA swabs. And at some point, I think we just overloaded. We're getting close to just being past human performance capability. In other words, I just can't be good at everything. So for the folks that sort of want to defund the police or not send us to mental health calls, not send us to the homeless or narcotic, overdose or something like that, I kind of support that, because I would wish we could get back to just sort of focusing on police work. Let's just be really, really good at this, and that, because it's really hard to stay proficient at all these things. And it's no news to anyone on this panel, and probably not anyone that's in law enforcement in the chat. But if you're not in law enforcement, maybe you're looking or you're security or something like that, you would be under-impressed with the amount of hours that we devote to training, right? Military special ops, they do a ton of training. They're training for 8 months to get ready for a 2-month deployment, right? Our training time is that. And then of that small training time, if we invited you in to see just sort of conventional police training, no one on this panel, the stuff that we do, but just your average departmental PowerPoint driven, get your certificate, check the box sort of training, you'd be under-impressed. You would not think this is anything great. So maybe we can just kind of scale back what we'd like police officers to be good at, focus on very core skills, and then just devote a ton of time to, let's take that person into custody. He doesn't want to get taken into custody. Let's become experts at all that. Let's become experts at decision making. Let's de-incentivize the whole, we're the cops, we just kick in the door and go get the guy. No. Let's incentivize those tactical thinkers and those folks that are smart and calculating, conniving, and they wait for their fill, and They debrief the guy down the street, and then they figure out a scheme to get up there. Let's incentivize those types of things, and I think we'd be better for it.
Scott, I think you hit the nail on the head, and this is a common conversation in my area of the country that comes up in training is exactly what you said. What else do we have to be responsible for now? And really, when you look at it, and I think actually I've had this discussion with Dr. Lewinski at some of the training I've been at with him, is the mental health crisis that we're faced with, and that the public and government leaders actually think that we have enough training to go out, evaluate a person in the 5 or 10 minutes we spend with them, make a mental health decision about what type of crisis they're in, what type of condition they suffer from, and then let's help them with that and get treated. When in reality, you're getting 4 hours, 8 hours every couple of years, or you take the time to go to CIT training and get advanced training on that. But I agree 100% that it's just the public, I don't think, has any concept of the variety of things that we are responsible for and receive little cross training in. And the other thing I think that's important is this word de-escalation is floating out there continually. The officers need to de-escalate. I mean, we hear that on the news every single night. But do they really know what that involves with somebody who has contaminated thought, who's in a crisis situation, and or who just wants to fight with officers and get away? I don't think there's a real concept of what de-escalates a situation and what the best tactics are without having officers sacrifice their safety to take somebody into custody potentially.
Yeah, I think de-escalation is definitely getting to be a catchphrase that's thrown around without a lot of people really understanding it, police included, as to what exactly that entails.
There's a question on the chat here about should we be, how do we train the public? Is that something that should we be trying to do, is train them on what it is exactly that we're seeing? And I've had this discussion with a few of you. There was a video that came out a few weeks ago about that suspect who pulled the firearm point blank and pointed at the officer's head. I don't know how they survived, but then they drew down and put the suspect down, and it went viral, obviously because of the races of the officers and everything that's happening right now. But I used that with the people that I was talking with and said, what a fantastic example to show the public that there's people out there that just want to harm police officers, that they're going to do anything they can to just get away. And the problem with trying to explain that to somebody is somebody who would never have that thought in their mind that I'm going to hurt another person can't comprehend the fact that there's people out there that will do that. And I think that's a massive hurdle to overcome if we're going to say, let's train the public. But how do you even start that conversation?
I think you've got two components on that, right? I mean, you talk about the fact that, and we touched on this a little bit, that we've allowed others to control the narrative. The vast majority of people get their training on police use of force and police realities through movie and TV, and that's the imagery, and it's dynamic, and they understand law enforcement through that. And the vast majority of us, I can't watch cop shows. My family laugh at me because, you see all the issues and I'm biting my tongue and I'm upset because it's so unrealistic. But a lot of times, more often than not, that's the reality that people have. So they understand that. Then you add to the narrative in the media, which is, as of late, not been very positive. And it keeps portraying this image. Those of us that have done this career, we know the realities, right? I mean, I would much rather talk some drunk into the back of my car than have to fight him to get in the back of my car. But I don't always, that's not my choice. Ultimately, they have a say in that discussion. And then when that fight occurs, the part that the public doesn't really understand, I don't think they understand the depth, is violence, real true violence is ugly. It doesn't look good. It will never look good on a body camera. It'll never look good, when the news capture it on camera. So there's a visceral response that people have, and there had to be a better way, and no, sometimes there's not a better way. But we don't educate folks to the realities of what we face. We let TV and movies and media, and it is powerful in how their brain understands what they think we do.
I'd like to talk for just a minute about a study we did on use of force and force training. Most of you here have heard us speak about that study. We hired 2 full-time behavioral analysts, 2 full-time exercise physiologists. We made 10,000 videos of skill acquisition all around force, looking for acquisition and degradation of skill over time in the academy. And we found that by the time the graduates graduated from the academy and were ready to strap on their leathers and get into a squad car, the skills were no longer functional. And you've already spoken about why that is, and it's a block and silo format that most instruction is taught in. But there's also another problem, and that is most of the skills that are taught are closed skills in a closed environment, meaning that you're restricted in how flexible you are and the integration of skills with other skills. So you go to do an arm bar, somebody, they resisted. You would never face that in training in some of the academies we looked at. And so you could not blend those skills together. But more importantly, 6 months after graduation, we came back on one of the academies and measured their skills 6 months after. And there's usually in a physical skill, there's usually a strategic or a key move that has to be done. For instance, if you're doing weapon takeaway, you have to make contact with the weapon, you have to make contact with the arm that's holding the weapon, and then whatever you're doing has to be applied, and it has to work. But only 28% of the applicants in weapon takeaway, or of the officers rather, because they were officers at this time, out on the street for 6 months, only 28% made that step of making contact with the arm or the weapon on weapon takeaway. Nothing you did after that mattered. And I'm concerned because the only people who bring force to any situation, and as you point out, there's lots of bad people in this country. There's a lot of bad people that intend to harm not only police, but others. And that's why force is necessary. But when it needs to be used, we should be effective and skillful at it. And I'm afraid, given our instruction, quality of the instruction, and it's not the commitment of the instructors. It is not the interest of the academies in trying to put out the best product possible. It's a methodology of instruction, it's a time, there's a whole variety of other factors connected to that. But we don't do a good job at teaching force and teaching decision-making around force. And I'm not advocating that force is the answer to everything. It's just if you're gonna have to use force, you should be good at it. But we're not. And the problem with de-escalation is the same problem we're having with force. We teach it in a block and silo format, and 6 months from now, when the officer has to integrate communication, and somebody said verbal judo and other sorts of communication and tactical skills together, we've not practiced or developed that. And as we've said in our newslines, there's no profession that trains so poorly but expects so much. And it's the officer that bears the consequences of that. The department certainly does. The civil suit industry in this country is $1.2 billion in civil suits for the 10 largest cities in this country. And about a third of that is police use of force. And so we're paying a price somewhere, and it's a hell of a price. And it's causing relationship problems in the community and certainly significant costs to us. And if we could only put some of that money into better training, we'd have better people and we'd have better outcomes.
I think a lot of people gloss over what Doc just said, right? I mean, because you hear things like, well, we don't do enough de-escalation training. Is it that we don't do enough? We don't do it the right way. You know, we don't do it in context where, you know, it's not just a matter of my ability to connect with somebody, but I also have to consider my backdrop, the environment. Do I need to go to deadly force? Can I use OC spray? We don't bring all of the skills together. So when I hear this statement, oh, we just need to do more of this. I think Doc's right, and people miss that component. We need to do those things together because that's how we function. But when we train them, it is almost always in a siloed system. I'm going to go do 8 hours of firearms training today. Okay. But what about the integration component? Well, we're going to do 6 hours of DT. And again, what about the integration component? So I think people gloss over that. We don't do it the right way. We don't bring all the skills together.
Even Lon's dog agrees. Like you can even hear that dog saying, "Hey guys, we gotta change this, guys."
The bane of my existence right now. A new puppy.
I want to give something away here. If the first person in the chat to tell me the name of Lon's dog will win a free all access pass. Because if you were here on Sunday, the name came up twice. So if you were here, you'll know the name of the dog. So if you put it in the chat, you win a free all access pass.
I do think Lon hit a very key point, though. It's not that we're not training in the right areas. We're not training effectively. It's we're not bringing all those components together. We're doing that silo training. We train on topic X, and then we move on to topic B, and then we move on to topic 4. And maybe at the end of the training, we might spend 4 days and bring all those things together. But by then, you've already forgotten so much. It was brought up by one of the comments on here about how skills fade over a period of time. That's true. If you're not constantly integrating, if you're not constantly building on those skill sets as you teach someone law, at the start of their academy, okay, great. It's good that they know the law, but how do they apply that? Then the next time when you're teaching defensive tactics, don't just teach the defensive tactics, but integrate that law component into it as well. It's not so much the how, but it's the when, it's the why. And constantly build on that throughout the whole training so that you're getting that effective training throughout the whole process versus just moving from step 1 to step 2. It's not a checklist.
Yeah, I'll agree. I'll jump in there on that. I always like to call it connective tissue, and that we're not focusing on the connective tissue between the pieces. And that's the one thing that I think that even as trainers, and I know I did it back in the day, where we're always focused on the topic of the training and not the connected pieces of it. And I think it goes deeper and further than even just as we talk about these different, between defensive tactics or firearms, but even within the own disciplines. And I found that we've done some work in that. Even when you're just at the range, we talk about repetition, and I'm a firm believer in repetition. It's how I got good at a lot of things that I can do proficiently. But every rep we do, we talk about that myelination, right? We always use that kind of that analogy as we talk about neuroscience, like we're neuroscientists, but we talk about that myelination. Every time we do something in isolation, that myelination also creates the silo. So every time we're drawing our weapon, standing still, that's doing it. So it happens within that skill as well as it does between the skills. So it's something I think that we as trainers need to be cognizant of as we're developing our programs as we go forward. As far as like that, it is frustrating when you get in a conversation with you guys here, and I'm just nodding my head going, we have such shared frustrations with this. So many trainers out there trying to do the right things for the right reasons. And I saw a comment on here about training standards to be the same nationwide in the academy. And it's like, if we, in reality, if we looked at what society, what we hold ourselves to be extremely proficient at, there isn't enough money or time in the world to train us to those expectations. It's an unrealistic expectation with this job. So the cops end up taking it on the shoulders. Now we can go into an academy setting, and I think ours is probably one of the longer ones around. We're up to 29 weeks now. And even with these new methods and following the science, doing it the best we can. And trust me, it's messy, it's sloppy, it's disorganized. There's a method to the madness. But at the end of the day, how far is that going to carry on? So you have maybe 1,200, 1,500 hours of training in the academy. You do the best you can, follow the science, and then boom, they're off. Our sustainment training systemically, what happens next year? Well, for most places that I know in New York, and again, there's the mandates. They don't want to be too restrictive, but they don't want to be too, you get 21 hours or 2 days or 3 days of in-service training, and it's check the box training. Come on. I mean, it's check the box training, or it's driving some mandate or some policy that's getting pushed down from the top, which even well thought out. Here's the policy. Do you understand it? Yes. Okay. Here's the test. Oh, look, they passed the test. Oh, even better. Let's do some retrieval practice on the policy. Give me an example. Put it in your own words. Wow, look at that. They really get it. No, they didn't. They have an understanding of the policy, but it doesn't change their behavior, what happens on the street. And I think Scott said earlier, looking at that, what I call the operational objective. What do we need cops to be good at? Focus on that, reverse engineer that back into our training. But if we get to the point someday we're out of the academy, we go out into the street, and then we're at work for 3 days and in training for 2, maybe we'll start to break into the area where we can actually hold people to, the expectations of rocket scientists and everything else that we're supposed to be, really, really, really good at. I love using like the sports analogies when you think about our professional athletes and all the training you get. I think one of the 4 science instructors, Chris Lawrence, has in his presentation, he talks about 20 years of in-service training as a law enforcement officer in hours across the nation is usually less than a high school football player receives in high school football training in 4 years of high school. All right. I tell people that at Thanksgiving dinner and at the table with close friends, and they just shake their heads. And when you talk about trying to get people to understand our plight and our challenges, if it's very difficult to do to some of your own family members and your close friends, how do we get a platform where we can get the general public to understand what the reality is and the challenges that we face? I say don't quit. Let's keep pushing. Let's keep trying to educate as much as we can. We can't give up on it. And then the big question is, here's our arena. This is where we're at. This is our mandates, where we're at. What do we do now? So how do we take this conversation and go, this is what we're going to do. We're going to start here, and we're going to start making this better. So
I want to mention or address a couple of comments that are being brought up in the chat session here. That we got a couple people over here talking about, do academies need to get revamped? And I want to kind of throw my thought at it. The answer is yes. It needs to be constantly revamped. In between every single class, you need to be looking at, what are you doing? If your class that starts midway through the year is the same as it was at the beginning of the year, you're not evaluating what's going on in the world, because I promise you the world's changed in those 6 months, and so your training needs to. So yes, you need to constantly be evaluating your training. It needs to constantly evolve with the spectrum that's out there. And then, as another commenter pointed out, that you got to get buy-in from the officers. I get it. That's a huge one. Officers have got to start taking personal initiative, and I don't have the answer for that one. That's a one that I've been trying to tackle for years. How do you get officers to personally invest in their own training? Because if they don't, if they're purely relying on their agency to give them the skill sets necessary to be effective, it's not going to happen. We've got so much on our plate, like Scott was talking about. We're supposed to be experts in everything in the world. But, at some point, we as an officer have to take that individual responsibility for our own safety, our own partner safety, our public safety, being a good police officer. And we have got to take that initiative in that training. So I do think we need to revamp our training constantly. And I think the individual officers need to be revamping their training constantly. And that one, there's a lot of individual onus on that.
You know what, real quickly on that point, Robert, I think what people don't realize is, for all of us here, I know for everybody, I can speak for everybody here on this panel, after every course, after every session we run, we're always asking, what could we have done better? What did we do wrong? How can we make changes? What's doing some research? What's the next thing coming down the pipe? Can I get that set up for the next class? I spoke with a lot of you about this before we even ran the summit, how, I'm not, before a session goes out, I may not sleep that night because there's that one other thing I want to add, that one other piece of information I want to put out there for people. And with this summit, for example, at the end of it, every single attendee at the summit is going to be getting a survey, essentially, on what did you like, what didn't you like, what training was useful, what wasn't useful. If there was a certain instructor, do you have feedback for that instructor? And then all of that's going to be going back to you guys so that you can take it and use it, right? I think people don't realize how much time actually goes in to developing these training courses, and how frustrating it is when you have an idea for change, but that change isn't allowed to happen due to whatever the variety of circumstances is within your agency. So,
God, yes.
Jason's smile tells me he understands how much goes into the background.
Well, exactly, and then some of the people that are watching, and certainly this group, I mean, the countless hours of your own time spent on developing courses, enhancing courses. What Robert was saying, though, I think is so key important in keeping the academy steadily evolving as time moves forward. And I think that is a struggle throughout this country, because that also, the planning, the number of required hours based on your state mandates for certain topics throughout the academy. And we're always talking, we want more time in the simulator, more time on the range, more time on the mats, more time with pursuit driving, high liability exposure, not only for the agencies and the jurisdictions, but certainly for the officers nowadays. But I will tell you that I've come up, and the people that I work with different updated classes and training, and it sounds great, but then it's the 4 or 5 levels that it has to go to. And what has come back has been so distorted. I look at it, and I'm looking at the people that helped me put this together, and it's not even what we initially proposed. So you have all those hands reaching in, but I also agree that it is incumbent upon us as law enforcement in this profession. You've got to keep up on your own with training outside. We're never going to see it with budgets, staffing levels, calls for service, caseloads, people on IOD and so forth. We're never going to get the hours or standard of training that we deem needs to take place. And even trying to get to like Dr. Lewinski's classes and other classes like that, where you're trying to apply human behavior and human dynamics into your high stress training incidents, and giving officers this exposure so they have something to draw from on the street. I would love to be able to train, have at least an 8-hour block for patrol every week that they rotate to. I don't honestly see that ever taking place, and it's kind of a shame.
Yep, agreed.
Yep.
Yep.
There's never enough time for training. There's always an excuse on some level, agency, individual. There's always a reason why training can't take place. Then it's up to the officer to find what's a reason to do it anyway.
Well, I think you hit on it earlier that, let's say you have a 3 or 4 day department in service that people rotate through, but those high liability things are often the time is cut, or we're not going to get to that this year because we've got this policy or that policy, or this is the hot topic in our jurisdiction right now, or what's on the national media. So we bring that in, and we all know what happens. We try and throw a block of instruction together to address that hot point. It's not always the greatest, because generally it's a week before. Hey, we want you guys to throw this in.
They give you a week? Damn.
You're calling each other, you're calling friends, you're just sitting on a computer online trying to throw a decent block together. And I'm always dissatisfied with that, because I don't think that we ever put quality into it that a lot of us in the profession expect.
Mm-hmm. I think, Jason, that's great. And I'm kind of thinking back what you're saying and what you're saying, Robert, and it reminded me of something that Tim Kennedy said the other day. And I'm kind of looking around at everyone sitting here and going, you're training with professional instructors, professional trainers, and how did you get to the point that you're at today? And the onus is on you, right? So we talk a lot about the frustrations with the mandates, the frustrations with being training commanders and getting things pushed into your time blocks that are just driven from above that are deemed important. And then it goes back to the personal individual responsibility. It's like everyone here knows what it's like to grind at this, just relentlessly grind at that. So where do we go? How do we get this going forward? How do we change the minds in law enforcement? I'm always going back to the academy. And to me, it kind of starts there, and is what we've been trying to do and add into the academy on purpose is trying to bring along this theme and mindset of a lifelong learner. The Carol Dweck stuff with the growth mindset. The mandated readings that we have in the academy are, they have their law books and everything else, but it's Stephen Pressfield stuff, The War of Art, Do the Work, Turning Pro, Jordan Peterson. I mean, this is stuff that's required reading for them now because they're trying to get them to understand that this stuff that you're going to get externally through the department as you go on is not enough to take you where you need to be in order to survive out there against these challenges. To be able to do this for 20 years with that training, you have to go into this and take this as a passion on your own. And it's great because in the academy, they're just like these huge energy cells just underneath the surface. And we just, as instructors, tapping into those things. When you start tapping into those things and bringing these kids alive, they have all this energy. Just how do we sustain that once they get out there, right, for 20 years? And that's where you'll find just your small percentages of people that take this as a passion, as a growth mindset, just to be continually learning at this stuff. I know you guys probably got the same thing going on at home, but my background is a fireplace and a piano. It's a green screen. Behind me is 200 books that are half read and notes and stuff flying all over the place and whiteboard, where I'm taking notes on everything I've been looking at the last few days. So it's kind of going a balance between what we're going to be able to pull from their administration and from our training at work and what we're willing to put into it ourselves. So for me, at least, what we've been trying to do in the academy is do the best we can to follow the science while in the academy and really put a lot of effort into emotional intelligence, group work, and getting them to understand that this is going to be on you for the rest of your career. So, belly up and get your shoulders back and your eyes wide open and start stepping into the ring, because this is going down for 20 years and you need to go out there and sharpen your skills on your own. I'm sorry, we are not going to be able to provide it for you.
Amen. I just want to celebrate a couple things that the students were saying on the chat. I pulled it up. Corey just said, it's too bad our chain of command from high didn't attend this summit or this online training. So I think Corey is hitting on something there. So just if you're watching this right now, just ask yourself this question. Did your training managers, your chiefs, your captains, your lieutenants, sort of your admin folks, did they attend this training? I'll bet most of you will say, no, not really. And then I'll also bet you told a lot of people about this training. You emailed it, you Facebooked them, you texted your buddies, hey, you should go to this. And I'll bet some of those folks didn't go either, right? But you went. Like, you signed up for this thing. So the questions of, like, how do we fix the police academy? Should we have a national use of force standard? How do we limit what police officers nationally and internationally are supposed to do? How do we fix these giant pie in the sky problems? Well, if you know the answer, you should start your own company and you're going to be a very, very rich person. We all think it's really, really hard to do, but the one person that you can control is yourself, right? And if you're frustrated because you're a hardworking professional law enforcement officer and you don't feel that your department values training, nor do your supervisors or your command staff as much as you do, like they don't value as much as you do, you probably won't be able to change them, just to be honest, right? Because a lot of these problems have persisted for years. And this panel, we haven't yet been able to change it. We're all kind of clawing and saying, hey, you should go to this training and think about this. But so far, we haven't changed society as a whole. So I would say start, kind of with the man or the woman in the mirror and look yourself in the mirror and just be like, am I doing literally everything I can do to improve my own skill set, my own knowledge, my own skills, my own attitude, all those KSA factors, right? As opposed to buying the next gun that you've already got 10 guns, you probably don't need an 11th. As opposed to buying the next cool knife, this one breaks windows or, all that stuff. Invest in some of the training that you see available. And if we can only do online stuff right now, or you're not able to do a lot of in-person, you can't travel, Well, there's a lot of content you can get. Get out of the mindset that I have to go to a class. It's 8 hours long. We break at noon. I get a certificate at the end, and that's what training is. Get out of that mindset. I mean, I want to sell you all that stuff because that's my whole business model. But that's not all that training is, right? 20 years ago, you couldn't hop on YouTube and see videos by professional instructors about all these subjects, right? You can hop on YouTube. You can watch police debriefs. You can participate in this. Get on LinkedIn and connect with all the instructors you see here and just pepper them with questions until, it's free, right? There's a lot of different ways of getting good training. And then once you kind of get all your stuff is going and you've gone to the classes and you've got the knowledge and you've read the books and you've consumed everything you can, identify one person at your agency, just one dude or one, whoever that you click with and you both see eye to eye. And sort of make that person your training partner. Iron will sharpen iron. Because what has happened, and I've witnessed this myself, when one person is getting all squared away and they're starting to use tactics in the field and they've got the research and they know how to do the interviews and interrogation or whatever your skill set is, people start going, hey, how'd you learn to do that? Well, I'd love to show you. Now you've got this little group that's kind of growing, and slowly that kind of starts getting to be a bigger and a bigger and a bigger group. So control your own sphere of influence, right? Sign up for the trainings, pay for it yourself. Don't let the department. For 21 years, probably the first 3 years, I think I let the department tell me how they were going to train me. And then I went, nah, this isn't going to work. This doesn't work. What I let my police departments, the two that I've worked with, I let them certify me. That's all I need from them. Certify me to legally be a police officer in California. So, okay, we got a DT training. What do? Hit this bag 3 times. Boom, boom, boom. Okay, you're squared away in defensive tactics. Thanks. Meanwhile, I go seek out my own training, right? I go seek out my own. I read my own books, and get. So just square yourself away as best you can. And to be honest, you probably aren't going to be able to change all the societal issues there, but there's a wealth of information, training information available to you anytime you're ready for it.
Well said, brother.
Yeah. I do want to throw one thing on something that Scott. Oh, I'm sorry. I wanted to throw one thing on something Scott said. He was talking about officers saying that, well, their command didn't participate in training. I want to throw a little bit of individual ownership onto that as well. Did you tell them about it?
Hmm?
Did you take that initiative and let them know that it was happening? If you didn't, then did they even know? So whose fault is it really?
Sure.
If you found a better training that's out there than what you're doing, did you let your leadership know about it? Did you take them out there to it to show it to them? If not, is it their fault for not implementing it? So you control yourself, but rather than sit there and constantly complain about what leadership isn't doing, what have you done to influence that leadership? We all have to take ownership within this industry and within this profession, even if we're not in that leadership role, because they don't have all the answers. They don't have all the information in front of them. They can't see everything at once. It has to come from us that are down on the ground. If we're not giving that to them, it's not their fault.
Amen.
The applied wisdom in this group is really impressive. And it really is a pleasure to work with you and to hear that. I've got a comment on that, but Dr. Black's comment leads me in another direction. So I've got 2 comments. I was a chairperson of the Department of Government at Minnesota State University. So I was law enforcement director and also at one point chairperson. We had a pub-ad program, public administration program. Guess what program most police leaders went to for an advanced degree for promotion within the profession? Were they taking the exercise phys or the kinesiology program across campus that taught about motor skills and learning and how to analyze things and how to teach human beings a skill? No, they were taking public administration, or they're taking criminal justice. And there's a total disconnect within the police profession between the administration, most of whom have these theoretical or applied or administrative degrees, and the people who are really concerned in the street about what works and what doesn't work and how to make sure that we have officers out there who really can do what it is we send them to do. And that appears to be not present in the advanced degree programs that most administrators seek. I don't know why that is, but I see that disconnect. In fact, I can count on less than one hand the people I know in law enforcement who have a PhD in some sort of program about teaching human beings professional skills that they need. So that's one side. The other side is we have spent decades trying to understand what the problem is that police need to address, particularly in the areas of force, but also in other areas as well. Mental health issues. What techniques work? What are the crises that officers have to deal with, which then dictate what kind of skills they need? So we've been mislabeled, unfortunately, because we do this. We study what the problems are, and people think we're creating the problem. For instance, if you study coronavirus, they accuse you of being responsible for bringing coronavirus on board. But we've spent decades, as I said, attempting to study the problems that police officers meet. One of those, which presents a real serious challenge for us, is the issue of edge weapon attacks. And the only thing that we see out there is the 21-foot rule. We've done some really pretty amazing research on time, distance, motion studies with assailants, whether it's 3 feet, 6 feet, 7 feet, 9 feet, it really doesn't matter. And we're also at this point doing studies on accelerometers and gyroscopes, 15 accelerometers and gyroscopes, downloading an immense amount of data on 4 different types of edge weapon assaults. One is a thrust, another is an elbow strike, the slash. Anyway, we look at various types of edge weapon attacks combined with times to charge. Everything that we have studied tells us that not a thing we are teaching in the academy has any evidence for being effective in actual defense against an edge weapon attack in the street. And that leads us to the fundamental problem. There is no research at this point in time about the wisdom, the application, the success or failure of anything we're teaching and how it works, not only whether it works or not, but what type of individual applying it makes it work. And we need a lot of research in that area. So I encourage people to do more training, as Jason says, and as Scott says. We really need to do more training because we need to diversify. We learn a technique in the academy that is not founded on science or real world application. And we need to learn something that really does work. The problem is, what happens when you use an unapproved technique? I think Lon was talking about that. What happens when you use something that you weren't taught because it's the only thing that works? And that's not my area. I just know that we have spent a lot of time studying things, and when you start looking at what's taught, it may not be what would be successful. And we spend almost no time looking at pre-attack cues or pre-attack schematics or how a situation evolves, which again is the core of great decision-making and performance. And so there's again, significant advantage. And people are looking at, the question is, how do we make it better? And we make it better by understanding what the problem is that we need to solve, defining that problem, and then finding a solution. And as was pointed out earlier, people thought that body cams were going to be the solution to everything. And they weren't, because we hadn't defined what the problem was and what the source of the problem was. But we implemented a solution we thought would work, or at least the public did. And when they found out it didn't work, they were unhappy. And now they want another solution without really understanding what the problem is that they're trying to solve. They just know they're unhappy.
Doc hit on 2 components that kind of blend together. Number one, he was talking about the education of some of our leadership and, what programs they go into. And I do a lot of expert witness stuff, but I was involved in a case where the chief of the largest agency in the state of Arizona was on the stand prior to me. And while on the stand, made the statement that they'd never heard of Graham versus Connor before, but they knew excessive force when they saw it. I was floored, and I wrote an article about it in Arizona Republic. And when I wrote it, the editors were like, "Well, we can't run this because, it's slander." I said, "Look, if I give you a copy of the transcript of the case, will you run it as it sits?" And they ran it because I had the transcript. Still do. But you're talking the number one with over 25 years of experience stating that they never heard of Graham Conner before, but they knew excessive force when they saw it. I don't know how you know that if you don't understand Graham versus Conner. But then that kind of dovetails into some other considerations. We talk about agency or officers going in and taking their own training, and Doc hit the one point about, well, what happens if you use a tactic that your department doesn't support? And I think Nicole was on here, made the statement that she took vacation time to go to an FSI class and got written up for it on her own dime, on her own time, because it wasn't approved. And you really start seeing some of these things start to happen, and it's amazing. I've defended officers that ended up using a technique that was not taught, and I'm like, look, it doesn't matter whether it was taught or not. It was under the circumstances. Was it objectively reasonable? I mean, that's really what it boils down to, because there are a lot of things that are taught that I might not be able to get away with, might not be able to use. A smaller officer may not be able to use. Just because it's taught doesn't necessarily mean it's going to be effective, nor because it isn't taught doesn't mean it's automatically excessive. But when you've got leadership that doesn't understand, they don't understand the dynamics of force. They don't understand the foundations and the legal aspects of it, or the human components. The fact that, somebody might have to start saying, I give up, and I end up hitting it 2 more times because my brain is not processed. I give up. And we're still going toe to toe. And it takes me a little while. And that looks bad on camera. But welcome to being a human being, man. We have limitations. We are not robots that immediately there's an input and immediately there's a change or a response. It takes time to process that stuff.
Yeah, just on the point of using techniques, if that's something that as an officer you're worried about, that, maybe you've got pushback from your department about attending training in your off time or something like that. A couple of points on that. The only thing you can be disciplined for, unless I'm missing something here, on stuff you do in your off time that's not a law violation, would be like conduct unbecoming of a police officer. So I'm not sure how a department can tell you what you can do in your off time, right? If you are not seeking training reimbursement or vacation or, you want to be reimbursed for the class, then you want to burn your vacation to go to a class. That's really, this is still America, comrade. You can kind of do that. The second thing is with using techniques you learn off duty or using something that wasn't a department sanctioned technique. I would imagine it's the same way, across America, but certainly here in California, just like Lon pointed out, the standard of force is what is objectively reasonable. There's nothing in the California Penal Code that lists any techniques. You can do this arm bar, but you can't do this, bent wrist thing or something like that. Or if you practice Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, you can't use any of that. There's no sort of list of different tactics to use. Really, it's just going to be looked at with being, kind of what was reasonable. So for me, it never caused me any concern to go take a class off duty or learn something that was over and above. I'm just, any kind of force I'm using, it's, going to be reasonable given the circumstances. So it's hard to say. I don't know if that helps anyone that's in the audience. I don't know if that relieves any of your stresses on that, because if you're getting disciplined by your own agency for something, but that's something I would definitely push back on. Maybe grab a union rep and just run that by them. Like, why am I getting pushback for what I'm doing on my off time to enhance my professional career?
This comment came up, and Lon kind of teed me up to it. Just to give a bit of context to this, though, Corey is a military MP that is not in the United States.
Okay. Military is a little different. I've spent many years as doing military law enforcement. So most of what we're talking about, when it comes to training and that initiative and things like that, we're talking civilian law enforcement. Military has a little different rule set behind it. They can tell you what to do with your off-duty time. Believe me. But that still shouldn't be a stop. Maybe that leadership does tell you no. Does that mean you accept that? Do you stop that fight? Can talk to them, convince them. You need to sell them. Do the research. Show them the benefit behind you attending that training. Change their mind. Right? Be that thorn in their butt that doesn't stop. That you're not going to stop until you get that answer you're looking for. But military is a little different. When they ultimately say no, salute, about face, press on.
Yeah, someone's saying in the chats there that his union was not helpful and he was ordered to leave a class on his off time. That stinks. And the other thing is, this is not going to make me popular with police chiefs, but if you find yourself constantly frustrated by what your department is doing, you're just constantly banging your head against the wall. God, these guys don't like training and they're trying to discipline me. At some point, it might be time to kind of leave that department behind and go work somewhere else. I mean, there's a million departments, certainly here in the U.S., and I'm sure wherever you're watching this from. But I experienced that, and I did 18 years of my first agency, the last 7 as a sergeant. And I, hopefully nobody's watching from that age. I really was not having a great time. I was really frustrated by internal politics and rules and regs and stuff like that. And I left. And I started over at another department that was more kind of like, we were more like-minded. We had similar visions and missions, and they sort of valued the things I did. And I had to go back to being an officer to do it. I left 600 hours of vacation on the book. I gave away my sergeant's rank, and I started over as an officer again. But I've never been happier. I'm happy every day, So I would just, use me as an example. I know you're like, well, I got a lot invested. Trust me, I had a lot invested. And, but I couldn't just keep, running up against problems and walls and all that kind of stuff. So, maybe just think about, is this a lasting place for me? And maybe I need to go work for an organization where I don't have to constantly fight to change things. There's a lot of agencies out there that probably would welcome a person like you, because if you're seeking out training on your own time, you signed up for this, I already know a lot about you. I know what kind of person you probably are. You're a professional. You want to be really good at this job. There's probably a lot of agencies that would love to hire you. So just think about that.
Good point, Scott.
Yeah.
I had recently, our last academy, I had a couple of officers came in from out of state, and it was one question that came up, and it kind of caused me to pause for a moment. And I didn't really understand it, but they said that the agencies they came from, if you had outside training or you were, a wrestler or whatever those skills were, you couldn't go to classes. You couldn't use those things out in the street. And I was really puzzled by it. So it was refreshing to let them know that no, we're okay with that, and go out there and train as much as you can. Our department did support that. You just might not want to document that you executed a Russian roll on the suspect in your paperwork, because nobody's going to know what that is. But it was something that really shocked me. So to kind of hear you guys speaking about it here, I didn't know it was that systemic. So that's pretty sad.
Yeah, it's really disheartening to see a lot of the comments that I'm seeing about how many people are talking about that their agencies are against them seeking additional training. I didn't realize it was as big of a problem as it was.
I didn't either.
Well,
Yeah.
let's test the waters. Let's make them take some training from Force Science and see if their agency gets upset. First, I don't know what's a good question. First person to name the city that the training center for Force Science is located in.
Google. You can pull up Google.
No, yeah, well, I guess everyone's on a computer. It's not the same as in class, right?
I recognize some students on here, so they should know.
Well, get it. It's so sorry to cut you guys off, but we do want to give some stuff away here, because these guys are. Here's the thing: this is the most active. For those of you who've been on the IRT before, this is the most active we've ever seen a chat. So this is fantastic, and this is the purpose behind what we're doing. It's let's get the conversation started, right? That's at the very minimum. That's what we can do. We can start the conversation, and it's up to you guys to take it wherever you can. And use us I mean, and this comes up in every single training course. It came up on a lot of the sessions at the end. Every single one of these instructors here said, if you need something or you have questions, contact me. It's not a joke. People think like there's this like mystical wall between students, and it isn't. There's nothing there. Literally pick up the phone and call us. We'll answer and help you out. Like that's the truth. So no, the city. It's not Chicago. Is it a city even? What's it classified as?
It is a city.
Okay.
It's not a village. We have a major-
It's everywhere. Just nice comment.
I'm surprised no one's gotten it yet, considering they can just go to the Force Science website.
Can I put it in, Adam?
I think so.
Yes,
I
Jason.
want to win some more training from Don.
While we wait for that to happen, I mean, just continuing what we were talking about.
I'm shocked, like everybody else, at what appears to be command level personnel who are, lack of a better term, basically threatening people from attending outside training and improving their skill sets. I think there's a couple of things, and I will qualify this, total personal opinion. Number one, it was mentioned in some of the comments here about liability. Number two, we've all had those people in departments and management positions who spent very little time, whether it's on the street or in specialty units or something like that, where they're out actually making active arrests and maybe haven't been in a confrontation, or if so, very few, and probably weren't the front runners in those. And I think it does a disservice, because if you look at nationwide, just what's happened in the last 10 to 15 years with the rise of the UFC, and having spent the first half of my career out in California as a cop and now in the Midwest, when you come out here, I mean, everybody lives and breathes wrestling and MMA. There are 14-year-old kids around here who can work most adult men and never even break a sweat. But even more than the DT training, I mean, you look at the different things that this instructor group puts out there, just getting into behavior-based training, de-escalation concepts, and what does de-escalation mean for a law enforcement professional? What's a better way to do things on the street? High-risk traffic stops, vehicle CQB. There's so much out there that professionals can get on their own to potentially save their lives and their partners, or the innocent civilian who's out there. So this really kind of left me a bit of gas, wondering what are we thinking, and why, for God's sake, would administrators not have welcome people, especially under budget constrictions nowadays, go seek their own training and pay for it themselves? I mean, I'm baffled.
Unfortunately, it really comes back to administrators sometimes just, and I'm going to say it, being lazy. The assumption is that if it's not in a policy, then it's not permissible. That's not true. And that's sometimes their concern. They figure they can control behavior, limit the liability exposure to the agency by saying, this is what we've approved, this is the only thing you can do. And I've taught DT for a long time. I can also honestly say, in all of my applications of any type of DT, arrest and control, it was never textbook. It was a dynamic application of something that was taught that we ended up making work, because it's not the same as when you're training.
Yeah, I think if your agency's policy is so restrictive that it says that you can only use a certain technique, you probably need to revisit that policy. That you at that point you're getting into policy books that are this thick, and you're really restricting your officers' options. And I'm just going to go ahead and say it, and I hope to God my director and my boss isn't watching. But if you're that leadership and you are the one that is telling your officers to, to not to go seek additional training, stop it. You are the problem. You accept innovation, embrace that initiative that your people are showing and encourage it and foster their development, or you're going to have a problem on your hand. You're going to have an exodus. You're going to have people that don't want to work for you because you're not allowing them to get the training and the support necessary to do their job effectively. And so without throwing in a lot of 4-letter words, knock it the hell off. Be a good leader and allow your people to develop and grow.
Well said.
Yeah, and if my chief's watching, I just want to say, listen, I think everything you do is great.
For the record, my
you're very good. I don't know what Robert's talking about, and I just think no, seriously, I think we could. The same problems that we're talking about existed 20 years ago when I started. We were going, the chief doesn't get it and the training sucks and this and that. So I'm not sure we're going to be able to solve it. So if I could give you one takeaway as a student, I would just say, don't worry about the things you can't change right now, unless you are going to, you're going to change these giant society problems and you're going to change the entire culture of your department. That's a great goal. And you can kind of keep whittling away at that if you like, but I would just focus inwardly on you and making yourself the best candidate. I would imagine there's like instructors that are watching this as well. And, as an instructor, make your class and your training, even if it's just like, hey man, I only teach like car stops at the academy. Like, that's all I do. Well, make it the best, car stop skill station that can possibly be. Just control like your little world, and people will notice and catch on, and then just kind of expand that as you go out. And eventually, like, you'll be an instructor and you'll be on this, 20 years from now, they'll be interviewing you and we'll all sit back and watch how awesome you are. Somebody mentioned Make It Stick as a book in the comments. And I think that's, if you just want a quick, like, how do I become a good instructor? Do I need a degree, or do I need to go to this master instructor develop? Well, I would start with that book. It looks like this. I'll just hold it up for you there. Somebody mentioned it sitting on my little bookshelf there. We really should be getting kickbacks from these authors because we just keep plugging this stuff. But I think a lot of instructors always mention this book because it's just so well written. It's very easy to understand, and it's got just a lot of great stuff. And it is, it's just got a lot of learning techniques, because there's a difference between training and teaching, and those are even different than learning, right? And I know you probably don't like death by PowerPoint. Everyone says, I don't want to watch that death by PowerPoint. Well, is it because you have something against Microsoft? No, it's because you get bored, right? And you're not engaged, and it's not fun to watch someone read that. And it doesn't require of anything. There's no active retrieval. There's no interleaving. There's none of that. It's just sort of watching, right? Real low form of learning. So if you read Make It Stick, it'll give you, the trainer, some ideas on how to make your training the best. So we're not going to fix all society's problems, but we can fix ours. Like, I can go back and change the class that we're going to do, and you can do the same. So, there's hope. Don't leave this like, everything sucks, and I'm just going to start smoking and drinking because life sucks and police sucks. It does suck, but we're trying to give you some tips to help it make it better.
Yeah, I love the positive stuff there, Scott. With you 100%. And right at my fingertips. Right here.
Why are we getting
one of the great ones. But it's funny. I want to mention that. I know you guys. I got a lot of emails after today's session went out. I expected a couple, and the one thing that I love about fellow instructors that are passionate about what we do and they're so positive is, I didn't get a lot of questions on, hey, how did you actually implement the interleaving between DT firearms and your skills and all that? What I got, my biggest request was, can I get a list of the books that you guys use for resources? So I put together a go-to bibliography, and I think I sent out about 15 of those today. And I love that, because people are doing exactly that. What can I do that's that climber's philosophy, right? What's within my reach? I just worry about what's within my reach and make that better. And to Robert's point, also, and every time I kind of hear this, it kicks up on something that I previously learned. And I love listening to Jocko. I don't know about you guys, but I just really get a kick out of that guy, man. I love him. We got to get him on here next time, Adam. But he always talks about the leadership is about talking about not just being a leader for the people that are working that, you know, you're responsible for, but up the chain, right? Up the chain. And I think that's a huge thing because, again, like we as cops, or for me 3 weeks ago I was, but we as cops, we're always an easy target. Administrators are always an easy target. I go back and look at kind of my understanding of some of the force science stuff that Doc Lewinski has taught me about attention. And I think that's a huge thing. And we can apply that not just to use of force things, but administrative things. When we talk about narrow and broad, internal and external, and we need our administrators to be good at what they're good at. That's the internal and broad, what is good for the entire department, what's going on out in society, that external and broad. So it's like contact and cover. We're good at what we do as instructors. We've got that internal narrow, what we're trying to focus on, but it's our job to tap them on the shoulder and let them know, right? Hey, this is what's going down. So to be that change agent, it's working on your folks, taking care of your instructors, building them up. And part of that is going up the chain and letting them know how dearly important this is, and build yourself in a position within your departments for folks that are there where you're going to get their ear. And that comes from working hard and gaining the respect of your peers, doing the right things for the right reasons. And in a perfect world, that's going to work out. And if it's not, take Scott's advice and bounce to a place that will appreciate you.
Mike Lon and I have been working on something for a long time, and I'm going to use Scott's illustration of the best traffic stop instructor. If you really want to look at how to integrate skills and how to build a clinician, that really good traffic stop is not only look at the tactics of the traffic stop, the environmental conditions, type of vehicle, the physical, social, the actual dynamic environment that's going on within there. You're on a bridge or you're on the edge of a creek, whatever it is. But you should also incorporate the person who teaches law with that, and add problems connected to the traffic stop as they are in real world situations. And that begins to link what people really do in the applied clinical world with what the training is. Because you're making legal and tactical decisions integrated in a clinical situation. If you want to get really creative, you have a resistant driver and you have your communication instructor come over and advise on how to use persuasion skills with a non-threatening but resistant driver. And you look at what type of persuasion methodology would be most effective with this type of driver in that type of situation. And you could do that not once or twice, but you could do that throughout your curriculum, integrating those things. You wouldn't get a lot of time at it just because of the nature and the time compression in an academy. But that's how you might begin to link some of the stuff together. So it's no longer in a silo. It's not quite interleaved, but it's integrated, which is how the skills are in an actual clinical profession, like law enforcement. You make a decision based on a behavior that is unlawful. You're in a tactical situation in which you make the decisions that are most effective and allow you to contain and control the incident. You then begin to engage, and when you engage, you encounter resistance. That's not force related, but it requires persuasion or some other sorts of process. And you don't look at what Thompson said, which was George Thompson verbal judo. He relied a lot on logical persuasion. Most people are influenced by emotional and characterological persuasion. And you begin to teach your academy a class how to look at what type of thing would influence this person most effectively. What do they need, and how can I use that to accomplish my task? And that type of analytical thinking is maybe one of the most important things we can teach in an academy process. And so I realize we're talking about a different type of dimension, but Scott, you raised it. You're good in this silo. How can you really help this person become as good as they can be as a professional?
Yeah, and then let's just be honest, right? So if you follow the advice we're giving you, and you've got 5 minutes to teach this car stop scenario, and you're bringing in all this science, and you're just doing this amazing job. Are the haters going to kind of come out at you? Yes, probably. Are you going to make some people look bad and they're going to kind of like not like you or something like that? I mean, that's the reality, right? That the police officers face. And I know people are watching this going, yeah, but my boss, yeah, but the academy director won't like it. Yeah, but some of my peers might be threatened by it. That is the reality of it, right? As you start to kind of shine, some people go, I don't like that. I just want you to kind of fall in line. We give you enough training already, and you're going to have to make that emotional intelligence, that maturity decision to say, listen, I'm going to have to navigate that, but I'm trying to be the best sort of I can be, and I'm going to put on the best training that I can. Here's why. And it is a sales job, right? Our job is just like every other job. There's office politics. There's emotions, and there's that guy, he's a jerk, and this person, doesn't like me too much. And you just kind of have to navigate that. But that's really no matter where you go. And to the doc's point about, being a clinician, that's true. And why, when you're listening to him say that, that sounds pretty cool. That's an aspirational identity to be to. You're already there. You are a clinician. You're doing the most interesting, most difficult job that there is. And you go out and make diagnoses of problems, come up with differential diagnosis. Well, it could be this, it could be this, could be this, but it seems like this based on the times I've seen this in the past. And then you're prescribing, instead of a medication, a sort of a treatment plan. Okay, we're going to do, these things. And if you start to look at it like an art and a practice, like a medical practice, every time you're going on those calls and every time you're developing those skills in the field, your practice, your knowledge base, your experience is getting bigger. Right. And so for those of you that are in patrol and you're like, well, gee, I don't get to work any specialties and I don't get to do this cool task force or something like that. Don't worry about it. You're out there doing all the really hard stuff and you're getting all those reps in. So, part of our day-to-day operations in patrol is training. If you look at it like that and you start to become analytical and you start to debrief yourself, and who cares if no one else is into it? After every call, conduct your own after-action review. Hey, self, how did that go? What were the top 3 things that went well? Top 3 things, why did that go how it went? How is what happened today like what happened last week? How is this, car stop different than the last 7 car stops going on? And you develop that kind of your own mind going, and you start to look at it like this, your skill sets just totally skyrocket. And notice you didn't have to go to any training class. You didn't have to pay a dime. No one's going to be upset by it, kind of thing. So I really like what you said there, Doc, just about starting to change our own mindset and looking at our being a police officer like very esteemed, like not unlike a doctor, right?
Right. You're a clinician dealing with the human problem. Right. It's not medical. It is the human problem. And I think Michael Mann is right. He made his students, at least as it came across the script here he made his students state probable cause for every traffic stop they did in their training. And that's really, I think that's the key, because you learn your legal section and you take a multiple choice exam. Talk to me about a sport where the athlete only knows the rules by taking a multiple choice exam versus actually applying the rules in the game. The rules are meaningless unless you know how they limit your play. Where's the end of your zone? Where is the line that you can't step over in a game, a tennis game? It doesn't matter what it is. You learn the rules and you learn how to apply those rules. And the most significant we can do with criminal law and traffic law and others is to really help people become diagnosticians and prescriptive people in relation to what the rules are and how to make use of those rules. And I mean that, how to make use of those rules, how to go to the edge to get what we need and not step over that line. And so it's a skillful knowledge and skillful use of the rules that really also defines a professional. It's not just the skills and the technique. It's the knowledge about how far to go and what it means and how to make use of that. And that also makes you very flexible and very creative and very, very relevant to the individual situations you're dealing in and not rigid. So I think it's all part of becoming a prescriptive thing. So thank you, Michael Mann.
I think it's important, Doc, when you're talking about this conceptual level is starting early in the academy with this too, right away. And I think that's where a lot of people are frustrated with trying to get young recruits and trying to train them in this fashion. You have the instructors in there, and then you spend the first 2 hours of play of the day playing whack-a-mole with the recruits. And anytime something comes up or an idea, creativity, they're getting whacked, during PT and everything else. And then you expect them the rest of the day to come out and be able to be these explorers of knowledge, working within this craft of all this education that you're trying to build around them with your instructors. Are we creating the right atmosphere for that learning to occur? Even if we're feeding our instructors properly and raising them properly, giving them what they need, which is an entirely different conversation that I think we could probably spend some time on, and that is how to help our law enforcement instructors become professional instructors, professional trainers.
Mike, in our 3-year study of major academies, we found the commitment and passion of the instructors was impeccable, amazing. But they lack the knowledge about how human beings learn the skills, the stuff that you've been talking about in this program, Adam, the block and silo problems, the problems with teaching a closed skill in a closed environment, like firearms are only taught on the range. But the officer will use that skill in an open environment, meaning it's going to be dynamic and changing, and heaven only knows the problem they'll be facing. And they'll be manipulating their own skills. So it's an open skill, an open environment. And we don't take it there. So besides those sorts of problems, the instructors did not know how human beings learned. And they also didn't know how to model, which was really kind of very interesting to us. But more importantly, beyond that, the force instructors did not understand the biomechanical foundations of the techniques they were teaching and how to adapt them to different people, or how to even not teach a technique because somebody could not use it because they were too weak, too small, too thin, didn't have the strength, whatever it was. They could not flex with what they were teaching. So the passion was there, the dedication was there, but they lacked the ability to make use of the science and to use the science of kinesiology and exercise physiology and the psychology of learning to really be good at what they were trying to do. They didn't have what you guys have. You guys sought out that knowledge on your own. I'm really impressed. The library that Mike has is really impressive. I know all of you have the same type of eagerness to learn beyond the skill, how to become great at what you do, just teaching.
One of the things here, one of the comments, and I just want to touch on it for a second because it came up in a few of the sessions. It came up with Jason and it came up with Lon. But so Corey's saying recording your students when conducting scenario-based training is a great tool. They get to see their own mistakes, do what they did well, and how they handle the situation. Just like some of these guys on here, I come from a kinesiology background, and we were part of a high-performance athletic group, you could call it, when I was in university. Video review was the norm. I mean, we started that back in the 2000s, and every practice, every competition, everything was video reviewed, and then we'd slow it down and we'd go frame by frame and we'd analyze it and say your foot was this has come up before in the past, so I'm going to bring it up again. So I pole vaulted in university. Okay, so you go ahead and make your own jokes now, but but with that, it's such a technical sport that if you were off by 10 centimeters on your plant, it would greatly affect your ability to actually get height in the air. 10 centimeters. And so you can imagine just how much we break down that video. But that's something that elite athletes have been doing forever. And so, the conversation that Lon and I had was, why are academies still using concepts and training from 30 years ago when we know that there's better ways to do things, right? If you took a trainer from like any professional sports team and put them in an academy, their brain would explode. they'd probably just crap themselves and crawl into the corner because they wouldn't know what to do with themselves. So the question is why is that the biggest battle? Like, why is that still there? It doesn't make sense.
Because it's easier.
Well, I think it's a.
No, I was just going to say.
Sorry, Robert. Go ahead.
And I'm going to take an admission here. I'm a huge proponent or a huge fan of videoing scenarios. I use it a lot in my training, and then I catch myself not, because I know it's a good idea. I know I'm supposed to do it. I know it's more effective, but maybe this training location doesn't have the best video playback, and so it's harder for me to show the students that. Maybe we got behind on training, and so that video review kind of cuts into my training hours, and that's an easy thing to take out. Next thing I know, I'm not doing video review anymore. So it's really that it's easier. That's not a good excuse. It's not an effective excuse, but it is the excuse that we frequently see. Video review, video in scenarios is exceptionally effective when it's done right, when it's done by people that know what they're doing, when it's by instructors that are doing it for the right reasons. I taught at a location. I'm not going to disclose the location, but they wanted us to record all the training, which was actually part of our standard practices. But at the end of the training, we deleted that, and I believe it was mentioned in one of the comments. One of the concerns that they had with their agency was that there was a liability issue about recording the training. Well, our standard practice was to, at the end of all training evolutions, was to delete that training video. So once it was done, once the students got the learning benefit, it was gone. Working with an organization, they wanted that training footage archived specifically for, if a student made a mistake in training, they wanted to be able to go back and do punitive action against it. That shocked me, floored me, appalled me, that was their mindset. And no wonder why they didn't do a lot of video-based training or video recording at that agency, why there was not a lot of support for that. So that there are several concerns with it, but I think the general answer is, comes back to, it's easier.
You know, you hit on a couple of points. You know, number one, that mindset that, you know, we're going to go back and take punitive action. You're setting up a performance environment, not a learning environment. What you're saying is, what's ultimately important is during this quote unquote training is you have to perform, not that you have to learn. I mean, one of the greatest ways that we learn as human beings is through our mistakes and trial and error. So instead of saying, hey, look, let's push how far you can until the wheels fall off and then we can back it off. We can't do that. You have to only perform. So what I see then is people don't give it their best. They don't give it their all. They don't train or perform the way they would in real life because they're afraid that they're going to fail, and now that can be held against them. So by doing that, you've limited the ability for your people to improve. You've limited your training program. I think it's really problematic. And I've taught for, outside of work, I've taught for one of the largest manufacturers of horse equipment for about 8 years. And one of the questions that we give on the test, the bonus question, has always been, do you save the video or do you get rid of the video? And there is no right or wrong answer. We just ask the question. Ultimately, I think you have to, at the bare minimum, you have to give them the opportunity. If you decide you're going to get rid of it, you get rid of it. If you decide you're going to save it, it's safe, but it's a training environment. This mistake, this error was done in training where it's supposed to be, and there was remediation. The person was successful in this. You eliminate some of the liability concerns, but to create that environment where an officer could be, you know, punitively gone after because they're training. Wow, you want to talk about?
I was absolutely appalled when I was confronted with that and refused to have any part in it whatsoever. It just floored me that was the mindset that was in place in that agency.
I would hope to say that that's the anomaly and not the baseline when it comes to the way agencies are handling that. And to add on to that video review, and I think it's important when we focus on the instructors, but it's great. The video review is great. I've used it in firearms before when we're looking at little technical things that maybe they can't pick up intrinsically that they're doing, like on a grip, and they don't realize how much their grip is breaking, something like that. Scenario-based training, all that stuff is great. We've used it in SWAT schools. That along with the Socratic method of feedback. So again, when we're giving these tools to our instructors, and I appreciate Robert being honest, because we've done this before. It's like, how much time is this going to take? Maybe that's their homework, and they take that film and they go home. But again, if we're going to give them feedback on that, are our instructors, do they understand the science of this? Are they reading, and are they being instructed on feedback? The stuff with Gabby Wolf, and if there's things that we can do and understand more about how we can give them more effective feedback, augmented feedback versus delayed feedback, how we use that, knowledge of performance, knowledge of results, intrinsic and extrinsic learning and feedback. And then again, the books by James Reason and Todd Conklin on human error from a systems point of view, when we're understanding knowledge and rule-based and skill-based errors. If you can get this information to your instructors so they have just a working knowledge of this stuff, they can be very much more effective at providing that better feedback when we're looking at video, when we're doing those Socratic feedback. We can start seeing these things in new light. Skill-based error, rule-based error. Your firearms instructors should be well versed in human error. They're designing courses. They don't realize that they're initiating a rule-based error in a course design. And then when something bad happens, they go back and go, look what this cat just did. It's like, you need to go back and look at that course, your expectations, where their attention was. And there's a lot of other things that we could be looking at. And that's where I think we could do our instructors a lot of work on this and let them know that, look, we understand that we're going to be taking our recruits and our trainers at the very edge of their ability. And failure is good. Forgetting is good. Then what do we do with it? What is the science support on how we get proper and the best, most efficient and effective feedback to our learners?
So you guys brought up, I think, a huge point, especially in my opinion, from the instructor level. And that is creating that positive training environment for people. It's okay to make mistakes. It's okay to fail. That's why we train. And that's why we do push one another so that it causes more stress, and you work through that stress, and then you take the feedback, the constructive criticism from it, watching and breaking down a video without embarrassing the people going through the class. And we all have those people who come through the class, and I know people who go to the range and literally get sick the night before because they're so stressed out about it. Yep. But creating that environment, like, being positive with them, explaining what needs to happen, helping them along. And I think that it was mentioned earlier in some of the comments about, are we developing leaders? Well, as instructors, yeah, you become de facto leaders in your agencies. And actually, in some cases, you're a more important leader if you become a subject matter expert in something that you're teaching. And based on that, it's your job, it's being professional, that you create a safe and a constructive environment to teach people and to make them okay with making a mistake and learning from those mistakes. And sometimes I see with instructors that we can either say something in front of the group or use a tone that is really condescending, maybe not appropriate at the time for what has taken place, rather than coaching somebody. And that's I think the mindset I try to use is, I'm trying to coach people. We're all dealing with people with experience in our profession. And because of that, rather than being the kindergarten or first grade teacher, let's coach them to be better at what we do as a profession.
Yeah, agreed. Jason, thanks. I'd like to, one of the things that we like to tell our recruits early on, like in the first week, is just define the difference between the comfort zone and the edge of your abilities. And we do that early on, and it comes to the physical component, working out, cognitive component, and the classrooms, and everything that we do. So that's a running theme throughout the academy is, look at your life up to this point. How many of you have learned to live in that comfort zone? You find a comfort zone. Look, we all do it now, right? And I use a kind of a weird analogy that I won't say here. But we get that comfort zone, and our job as instructors to take them at the edge of their ability to let them know and do demos and let them know I'm taking myself to the edge of my ability, beyond the edge of my ability. I just failed on that course. Watch me demo, and okay, I got 3 out of 5 instead of 5 out of 5. Well, I'm not going to get any better getting 5 out of 5. So that's a running theme that we try to get people to understand, that get comfortable taking yourself into a place that's uncomfortable, where it's frustrating, right? Where you get mad at yourself, you get frustrated at your own ability levels, and then start working that and start understanding how to be an intrinsic learner. Not that learning is intrinsic on how we design it, but intrinsic as far as my own knowledge and my performance, as I'm going through that. And we can teach people to do that. I've always said this in training. We're trying to train everyone to be a train the trainer, because we don't have the time to give them that from the outside. So we teach them to do that themselves. And that's just something that we carry through all the way through the academy, so that the students understand that I'll say this, my favorite thing to do on the last day during graduation is to tell the recruit class, if you think back of what you were before you got here and look at yourself today, not just your physical specimen, everything that your lifestyle from the day you wake up in the morning to the day or the hour you go to bed at night, everything that you do, how much more productive and efficient you are in your life. My favorite thing to tell them is a little secret. You never needed us for any of it. These are things that you could have done in your own life. You needed us for the information. You needed us for the professional stuff that we give you. But the lifestyle change, the true lifestyle change that turns you into a lifelong learner, and to take yourself and challenge yourself every day, you never needed us for. You decided to stay here and do that. And that's one of my favorite things to tell people. And it's just not just a motivating thing. I truly 100% believe it.
Yeah, Mike hit on an important point about being uncomfortable, right? And the reality is, if it doesn't challenge you, it doesn't change you. That's where our growth occurs, where we're uncomfortable. Our growth occurs when we're challenged, whether it's working out, strength training, whether it's learning, whether it's, whatever it is, that's where we actually get better. So we have to live in the uncomfortable. And a lot of times people aren't okay with that, but that's where we need to learn to be when we're training, to get the most out of ourselves in the future.
Sorry. I mean, okay, thank you. What is interesting is that those academies that demand perfection really create exactly the opposite of a professional. They have someone who needs to protect their integrity, their reputation, by not trying. And as you're pointing out, there's a phrase from Adlerian psychology: the only way we grow is to have the courage to risk to be imperfect. And I think that's the foundation of everything that you're saying. I want to springboard on some of the things that have been said and make 2 points. When we were over working in the UK, we actually ended up at Pinewood Studio, looking at their. They have a video capture system, motion capture system, that they were doing with the James Bond films and other things they were making at that point. But we were trying to help them become more efficient in their biomechanical instruction on what they were teaching. So they were teaching sequencing and contralateral symmetry in their motions. So people were actually operating from a base and dynamically rotating as they should to make the techniques effective. And we thought they could teach that using video ahead of time. They could really create, because there were known techniques, they could literally have somebody model the technique and have the students look at it and tag, or at least document, those significant parts of what was correct or incorrect about a motion before they got on the floor and started to do it themselves. And that would then, using video, as was suggested earlier by somebody, it's used throughout training, not just for the instruction, but we could use video to help people self-correct or understand how to have a good motion, and then look at what's wrong and what's right with that motion. They could learn that before they actually learn the technique. In fact, with our attempt at that point, we were trying to get it set up so they would pass a program on biomechanics of all their physical skills before they even entered the academy. That way, by the time they got to a technique, they would know how it was to be done correctly. And with the correct kinesthetic feedback, they would be able to analyze their own mistakes, which is the key to really progressive professional learning. I want to look at one more point. And that point is we teach in our academies to competency and not proficiency. And that is most reflected in a comparison that Mike made, in which we have, Chris Lawrence was working with us when we were looking at comparing training, law enforcement training in the UK, Canada, and the United States. Chris Lawrence, we actually tasked him with the task of comparing that with other sorts of things. And he ended up comparing it to literally academy training at 60 hours. It's equivalent to a high school athlete playing one sport for one season for half of that season. Count it out. 10 hours a week, 4 weeks a month, that's 40 hours. That's 40 hours in 1 month. Your academy instruction, arrest and control techniques is 60 hours. That's 1.5 seasons of a high school athlete playing one sport for one season. But the high school athlete has the advantage on the officer, because a high school athlete will go beyond competency and try to achieve proficiency, because they will test their skills all out in competition, in game, at least 5 times in that half a season. And we never do that in the police world. We never take the officer to the point of failure in anything. And that's, I think it's critical to stress out. Now, I understand that there's a concept in physiology, comes out of Canada, about fight and flight and freeze. And I think it's time we abandon that and we learn to teach officers how to use emotional intensity. Human beings experience emotions in a complex fashion. And if you're at the starting line in a sprint race, it is neither fight or flight. You have to have emotional intensity to fuel that dynamic action coming out of those blocks. If you're going to take somebody down, you have to have the emotional intensity to accomplish that task and the confidence in it to make that work. Fight or flight should not be taught in an academy except in the very beginning. We should really be teaching people how to focus and how to utilize their emotional arousal in a situation to be more effective and to control it. Whether that's whether you're dealing with someone who has lost it, and if you really deal with someone who's lost it, and I started my professional career working in a psychiatric hospital, and dealing with people who are really out of control is very frightening. And if you could use that fear, that emotional arousal to help you focus on what you need to do to work effectively with that person, you have really, really built a significant skill. And we don't do enough of it. We are so into, let's not talk about fear or anger. Let's leave all that emotional stuff off the table. And yet the most effective athlete and the most effective officer knows how to use their emotion, either displaying it or hiding it, but using it effectively in their encounters. And so I think competition, all-out effort, and I understand there are risks involved. I got it, but we come nowhere near the challenge that officers face in the street with the techniques they have to apply. In fact, in one of the countries, we tested athletic skills in an academy. They could never use that skill against resistance because their national commission said people might be injured in the academy, and therefore the officers could never use a technique against resistance. The first time they met resistance was in the street in an actual encounter. And that's absurd. That is absolute. Give me a profession that will handicap their professionals, their up and coming professionals, by that kind of regulation. It's absurd. So a couple of comments there.
Yeah, I think that, just on that last point that you made there, Doc, about, getting somebody hurt in the academy. If you're a police administrator, even if you have the best intentions and you subscribe to everything we've been saying, to this point, I'm sure you have some, indigestion about that. And you're thinking to yourself, well, yeah, but we just spent $100,000, to hire this guy. Or we just spent $50,000 to hire this guy. The background, the polygrapher, the recruitment, all the employees that had a piece in this. And we've got this kid, and it's really hard to recruit officers. And we want him to get the best training, but there's this fear of him getting hurt and rolled back or fired or not past the academy. And that therein lies the problem, right? Because even if people agree, with what we're saying, and well, we should change the academy, we should make it harder, and get rid of the block and silo training. It should be, this really high-end stuff where there's going to be a lot of sustained resistance, and naturally people will get hurt, just like the analogy the doctor used in football practice. People get hurt. It just happens all the time. And it's because we're training hard and things happen. So how do we change that? And can you could we play this tape that we've just been speaking for a couple hours here and play it for a chief and say, see, chief, we got to do things differently. Would they be convinced? My guess is no. My honest assessment is no, they would not. And they'd say, hey, that's all good and well, but we got to get them through the academy to get them certified. That way we can get them on the streets, and then we'll train them. And then naturally we would all say, in the FTO program, is that where we really want them to experience this stuff for real in the field when the danger is really, really high? And there's never a good answer for it. And that's one of the key issues we face. And then it's not just in the academy, right? In defensive tactics training in California, we've got to go to, X amount of hours every 2 years, whatever it is. And the problem still persists. So our chiefs of police don't want people, don't want us doing a lot of high-end defensive tactics stuff because we don't want to get someone hurt. That patrol officer can't get hurt because he's got to be at work tomorrow at 6 to, push a patrol car around. Mm-hmm. So there's not, we are all preaching to the choir, and we all, sort of believe the same thing, and probably the students do as well. But no one else seems to agree with us. Not the public, who's, they want to defund the police. And we're saying, actually, to make the police do what you'd like them to do, be really proficient, it would be very, very expensive, just being honest, right? So instead of working 4 days a week, 11-hour shifts, you're actually going to work 3, and the 4th day will be a training day. It'll be very, very expensive. We're going to get Lon, we're going to get Vitra, we're going to send people these classes. It's going to be extremely pricey. With just backfill overtime, and people are going to get hurt, so they'll be out on disability for a while. And so, I guess until people kind of go, yep, we want to make that monetary investment into what training really would be, I'm not too confident that's going to change. And that's why I just think, oh gosh, sometimes we'll keep fighting, we'll keep hammering it and saying that things need to be done. But at the end of the day, if you're an operator watching this, right, you're an individual officer, you are the patrol officer, the detective, whatever, you're watching this. Until we can get all this changed, and we will keep fighting for you, you're going to have to take it upon yourself to seek out the best training, because your chiefs and the administrators and human resources and city attorneys and all that, they're not sort of on our side, right? Maybe they don't have any malintent, but they see life through a very different viewfinder than we do.
Right.
We see it as life and death. They see it as liability, money, staffing, that kind of stuff. And we're going, hey, who cares about that? Somebody can get hurt, and they do, if this doesn't go right.
Scott, there's some excellent feedback about people that are combining their tactics and fitness courses and putting that stuff together. And there is no question that I'm not advocating that we injure officers. In fact, I competed at a very high level as a high school athlete nationally and also in university. And I always stayed away from the pole vault. I would never go near the pole vault pit. You hear that, Adam?
Yeah.
I would swear that I'd break my neck on that pole vault. So, Adam, would you tell us how you could do something risky that involves emotional intensity, symmetry, complexity of action, high level of threat, and yet do it with relative safety?
I don't think safety was a concern, Doc. Have you ever seen Track Girls?
Chasing them.
Yeah. No. It's
That was in it to meet the chicks. Let's just be honest. Come on.
we all know what's going on here. No, it was it's what that sport was it was, and I think this is probably why I enjoy training so much, is because what that sport entailed was so much cross training and diversified training. There was no other group in the world where we cross trained. We did gymnastics one day, we were in the pool one day, we did racquetball or bicycle, or we did hill runs, and then we had a professional weight coach, and we did weightlifting, we did Olympic lifting, and then we did track, and we did long distance, short distance, mid distance. So we integrated so many different types of training because each one had its place, and each one had its benefits, and each one had its weaknesses. So the job of the coaches was to find out what all of those were and how they work best together. And I think what that puzzle is now that I've been doing this for a long time, I think I've come to realize, I think that's what all of us love doing, is we love trying to put that puzzle together, whether it's for ourselves or whether it's for our students, because every student's a new puzzle. And I think what was brought up earlier was that if you're an instructor and you take this wholesale umbrella approach to how I'm going to teach, you're really doing a disservice to your students, because we all know that not everybody learns the same. And so I think that's a massive point. And that's probably the reason why, looking back at it, if I were to put a real pin on the reason, was probably because of the challenge.
I'd like to add one other thing. In our study on academies, 3 states, 10,000 videos, we found that after a year, 30% of the people in those academies have left. And they've left because they didn't know they'd have to work shift work. They didn't know they'd have to work with people who didn't like them. It was absolutely amazing. I think what we can do, and I can ask Lon or Mike or any of you guys here, is there something we could do like the military does, so that people entered a fitness program and took ride-alongs and learned about the profession before they got to the academy? Is there any way to implement something that would supplement academy training, minimal cost, but would begin to allow us to have a higher caliber of training? And that's just not physically. Perhaps we could do it with some communication skills, people riding along. Certainly, no learning is possible without people asking the question, why do I need to know this? And realistic ride-alongs, not television, but realistic ride-alongs where they actually see officers encounter difficult people and the kind of challenges they would face, would really begin to raise that sort of question, like, now I know why I need to learn how to talk to people who disagree with me. Otherwise, the communication course in the academies is useless, because there's no question that says, why do I need to learn this? We feed it with examples, we feed it with challenges, but there's nothing like encountering someone that's difficult in the street to really tell you that you better learn this skill, because you're out there by yourself next time.
I'm going to jump on this one real quick, Doc, because it actually this topic came up in one of the roundtables that we did, actually, that Robert was a part of on active threat response, because we had talked about pre-exposure training and how important that was, especially for TEMS units, for anybody who's going to be a medic or anything like that, whether you're in the military or you're in law enforcement. You don't want the first time that person sees a gunshot wound in a human being to be on in the middle of a call, and they have to save their buddy's life. No one's going to be prepared for that. So we talked about that pre-exposure training, right? Whether it's using animals, whether it's using live or dead animals, depending on where you are and what the laws are, or even integrating, doing some cycles at a local hospital, an emergency room. I think people would be shocked to realize how slippery blood actually is.
Yeah.
Right? Like you don't, until you're actually trying to grab somebody with covered in blood, you don't understand that reality. And so like that pre-exposure training from the physical skill standpoint, which is what we were talking about, is so critical. But that's exactly what you were saying, is that pre-exposure can be done as a physical skill, or it can be done on an academic level, or just as a psychological exposure to, you know, how is it interesting is it the first time you deal with a paranoid schizophrenic whose reality is not yours, who is experiencing something completely different in their mind, and now you have to try to de-escalate and relate to that person, be empathetic to that person when you really have no idea what's going on. I think those scenarios are really what is that crux of what you're talking about.
Yeah, Doc, and you brought up a point about ride-alongs and so forth. I know that two of the departments that I've worked for, that's actually part of the pre-employment process. Is they get to choose a 4 and 8 hour time block. It's generally on a swing shift or an overnight shift, so it's busier. There are more calls to respond to. And quite honestly, we'd ask that during the background phase if they understood that, you know, anymore we're 24/7 operation. Your nights, weekends, and holidays, those aren't just time off. And I think a lot of departments throughout the country would be that way, but I'm not sure that that's really the first time that these people would be exposed to that part of it. I think the exposure to, wow, this person is not going to get out of my face and is telling me what they're going to do to my mom and my sister and my wife. That's when it gets real. And maybe they don't have the prior experience with that. They haven't been in any fights on the street and things like that. But I don't know to what degree we can inoculate people to that. Certainly some of the other stressors, as Adam was saying, you know, maybe they have to go to the morgue and go to an autopsy, see a dead body, or one that's actually been in a house for 4 or 5 days before we go and find out. You get that check the well-being call, and the next thing you know, here you are. I know that we've had people struggle with that and consider leaving because it was their first exposure to anything that grotesque. But I think a lot of agencies, and you other guys commented, is that kind of a practice in yours with the pre-employment ride-alongs and so forth?
Yeah, I mean, a lot of them are encouraged for that. The challenge that I think that we run into is, and it goes back to the part of my presentation that I did, we do a lot of what we call stress inoculation training, and there's a comment on here about that. And the reality is it's not stress inoculation training, it's stress exposure training. I think we can expose people to all of this, but you got to give them the coping strategies to be able to overcome it. And we don't do that, you know, and most of our quote unquote stress inoculation is just exposure. It's like, okay, I'm going to dump you into this event and I'm going to shoot a bunch of Sims rounds at you and put you in a red men gear and have somebody, you know, step on your head. You know, the academies that we saw, you know, back in the day, we did a stress exposure drill where some of these folks had never fought before. They got headgear, gloves, and you went into a slugfest with somebody with 3 minutes. And some of these folks had never been in a fight before. And, you know, a lot of them would quit. I don't want to do this. Well, doesn't mean that we can't give them skills and help them to develop the skills, but we have to be careful how we do it. If we just go back to the analogy I keep using, exercise, if I want you to work out, I want you to get you strong. If I put you under a squat rack with 500 pounds, I'm going to crush you. That's not how we do it. You know, we bring you in, we bring a manageable lot of stress load on you. We increase it as you develop your coping strategies and you get better and better at it. Those are the things we have to look at. And that's not only just as we're screening people, but that includes the people that we have currently. And I don't think we do a good job with that.
That's right on, Lon. Almost every exposure program we've run into, it's been not stress inoculation, it's been stress overload. And we've encouraged, for instance, the hood drills, box drills, door drills, as a way to teach people to look and see under rapidly evolving high stress circumstances. And that not only exposes people to the stress of a rapidly evolving situation, but teaches them to look and see and read and understand as much as they can, which then has an indirect effect, because we know there's a budding body of research from fMRI and EEGs that eye focus under stress condition facilitates control of the emotional arousal. If you look and you're trying to see and work and understand what is happening, your emotions are hooked in behind your cognitive intent. And the door drills and hood drills really not only expose people to something, but actually begin to build some sense of emotional control in that situation, as people are scrambling to try to understand what circumstance is being shown to them on the other side of that door. And that means both, versus putting them in a sim situation and blasting them with rounds, which some people think is really a good way to train people to endure. And it's not helpful at all. It overloads things, buries the self-concept.
I think the very term stress inoculation is where we're getting it wrong.
Yeah.
We don't want to inoculate people to stress. I mean, inoculation is creating an immunity. Do I not want people to react to stress to become immune to it? No, that's the exact wrong thing I want. Like you guys have been saying, it's exposure. I want you to be exposed to stress and learn how to think and perform under stress. But the goal is for you to still experience that stress. If we take it to the point where you no longer feel that, then now you're a danger. You're going to be doing some really dumb stuff. So right. The emphasis, I think, is proper exposure, not trying to get to the point where they're just so used to it that who cares?
Well, it's not so much that who cares. What we're really looking for is to control the stress response so we don't get some type of amygdala hijack. We don't want the prefrontal cortex so overloaded because of the stress response that they can't cognitively problem solve.
Right.
So the goal on any inoculation, and go to the whole cowpox, smallpox aspect, we give the body smallpox or cowpox back in the day, right? Go back to Jenner's work, and the body fights it off, gets a little sick, fights it off, and now all of a sudden there's an immunity to smallpox. Doesn't mean it doesn't affect you, just means when it does hit you, your body's got the skills to kick its ass. So that's when we talk about the immunity. We're not saying that it doesn't affect you. We're just saying that your physical being, your psychological being, when it does hit you, you got the skills to handle it. And by doing an inoculation, you give a small amount, and the cognitive and the physical skills start to develop, and we develop the coping strategies. And then I get a little stronger and a little stronger. I'm going to keep coming back to it. It's like working out. If I want you to get stronger, the whole concept of supercompensation theory, we're going to work out a little bit, let your body rest. Now you're getting a little stronger. Now we're going to work out, put a little bit more on the bar and let your body rest. And then I'm going to bring you back in. We're going to put a little bit more on the bar and you're getting stronger. And then we're going to let the body rest. That's really what we're talking about with inoculation. It's not that it doesn't affect you. It's that you've got the skills now that when it does come, I got this. It's not that there's not a response. It's that it's a controlled response and it doesn't overwhelm. And that's really what we're talking about. Somebody mentioned Donald Meachenbaum. You talk about the godfather of stress inoculation training, and they're absolutely right. I'm going to tell you right now, if you think you're doing any type of stress inoculation training, you got to look at Donald Meachenbaum's work, what he says on how to implement it. I bring this up in one of my presentations. For those of us that are force instructors, one of the easiest things that we could do right now, that we could bring in a coping strategies into our DT, our firearms, whatever it is the concept of using autogenic breathing inside the context of the training that we're doing. More often than not, I see trainers teach 4-step breathing, autogenic breathing, whatever you want to call it, in a classroom setting, right? We're all sitting comfortable and we're talking about it and whatever. No, I need it in context. And I need you to, as an instructor, to make sure that I'm using it in context, even if you have to go, hey, right now, this is where I need you to engage. Give me a 4 count in. Right? that's where we start bringing those skills in. So that's a simple way to bring a coping strategy, a coping skill into the setting of defensive tactics, firearms, arrest and control, so that when we pair it up psychologically, when they need those skills, they can engage in that skill. There's some type of linking to those two pathways.
That's awesome. I mean, Adam, how much are you charging for this session, by the way? You should be charging a lot of money for this. This is great stuff. Seriously, it's amazing stuff. I'm like taking notes. Hyperamygdala, I think, I don't know how to spell that, but we'll figure it out later.
I've been having to Google a few things.
Mike's got it as well. Mike, send that to me, please.
Yeah.
No, but seriously, one thing that I thought was very interesting about what Lon was and the doc were saying is when we're talking about stress and from a training standpoint, is think about this. So this officer gets out of the academy, right? And most academies are not as squared away, probably as Mike's are. They've just kind of gotten this block training. They've got their little accreditation, and now they're in the FTO program. Should there be something between the academy and FTO program? Absolutely, right? An in-house program where they come back to your department, and then you're running them through all these great scenarios. And let's say that's not even occurring, and they're in the car, they're live, right? They have, for the first time, they've got bullets in their guns, they've got a real radio. Oh my God, and they're going to go do, God's work and do police work. That field training officer is everyone says, well, it's the most important department or most important position in the department. It really, really is. That field training officer, that man or woman that's sitting on the passenger side there, has got their hand on the throttle, but it's not the throttle of the car, it's the strap, right? You as that FTO are not only having to, be the operator and respond to whatever you're doing, but you're controlling how much stress that trainee needs, right? That trainee does need some level of stress. They need to learn how to operate in that environment, but that FTO should have their hand on how much they get. Day one, week one, as a police officer, they're not going to get much, right? You're going to kind of control everything. You'll be going hands-on with the suspect, and they'll just sort of be watching. And as time goes by, you're kind of allowing them to experience more stress. You're not jumping in, when the guy starts kind of getting a little bit mouthy and he's giving those cues like, yeah, you might be kind of resisting. You're allowing them that space, but the FTO is controlling how much stress they get, because we don't want you to give them none and then have them graduate FTO and then be on their own for the first time. We want to know how they operate in it, but let's not give them more than they need. Right? Not how much they can handle, but more than they need at that moment in order to satisfy becoming that solo beat officer standard. So we do FTO training classes, and that's sort of one thing we try to get the FTO students to think about is you are the titrator, or another medical term. You're titrating, meaning giving just enough to be effective and not too much to hurt anything. A very, very difficult task there.
Scott, that's great. That's great. I'd like to hit just a bit of neuropsychology first. There's research that's been going on for the last couple of years on the relationship between the suborbital frontal cortex and the amygdala, and there's a direct linkage there. And some of the research is on the relationship between that. Lon and I were talking about it the other day. You're working on a treadmill, and your amygdala is saying this hurt, stops. And your frontal lobe is going, but I want to get somewhere with this. Shut up. And it suppresses the amygdala. But the amygdala will surface again and say, this really hurts. You got to stop. But the frontal lobe will say, I want to accomplish something. And that's the key to great performance under high stress. I've interviewed over 3,000 officers in law enforcement who've been involved in deadly force encounters, from making a decision and it was a correct decision and they didn't shoot, to officers who have been in 20-some shootings because they're on special teams. And it's totally apart from force recon and SEAL teams and other people I've worked with. And the characteristic of great professionals is their focus at getting the job done regardless of anything else. And that is frontal lobe engagement with, interestingly enough, there's a lot of visual focus involved in it. And that's the goal of the inoculation process. It's not the exposure to drive fear into the student. It is to give the people a confidence they need. So when the going gets tough, they know they have to accomplish something and they can do it. Exactly what Lon is saying. It is a key to great performance under stress, to courage, to real. We don't teach it in the academy. So many opportunities to do autogenic breathing and to teach that cognitive sort of process and the focus, the discipline to accomplish something when it hurts. Mike would take his people on a run. I wouldn't even want. I was a middle distance runner. I wouldn't want to take Mike's academy. It was a painful process, but you're teaching people that they can accomplish what they want to, and that skill, that achievement, is Mike is leaving people with amazing things. Leaving the academy, that sense of confidence and that knowledge that they can do things when the going gets tough. They can conquer their fear. Boy, that's the goal of an academy.
Yeah, Doc, I'll jump in and kind of connect the dots on that a little bit. And fortunately or unfortunately for my students in the past, that every time I listen to Doc talk about the stuff and the research is doing, it's like, I'm going to go apply this right now. Nobody's looking. Okay, let's go. Let's get at it. And when we're talking about this, stress and trying to get them, and Lon making good points about this stuff is as we're building them up through that, and it's going to start happening, but we can do this better by giving them tools, right? To give them tools other than we took you one step, you accomplished that. Now let's make the next bar low enough so it's attainable, move on from there. And that's great. And there's also nothing wrong if you follow Dr. Vicker's hard start on decision training to throw that one thing in there that's a little bit more difficult way outside that zone for them to use. It's okay once in a while. It's actually good. But if we can give them tools, and what we did early on in the academy again with this one, and I'm just sharing some experiences applying what Doc was just explaining. When I came through, it was always, take a deep breath, and that's about as good as you're going to be able to deal with that. But we talked about, I go back to this a lot, but attention has so much to do with understanding of your cognitive attention, visual attention, auditory attention. Where's your mind at? Okay, and when they can start articulating this and understanding this in an articulate way about internal and external focus of attention, when you let them know that there's something you can do about that, okay? When Doc interviews all these people and come back and there's something that comes back and there's a connection other than the breathing where you can use an intense visual focus on the task at hand, an external focus on task at hand, that's going to help your brain calm down because you start pulling that attention away from what's happening to me, what's going on with me. I'm nervous. I'm going to screw up. I need to get this job done. Focus on the task at hand. Anybody that I've trained that's listening to me right now is going, ugh, all the time. So we talk about this early on the academy. So as we're training and we're going through, we're going back to that articulation. We're giving them the tools to become better at managing stress because now they understand that, look, I'm going to feel this way. I don't care how comfortable you are in your shoes. To this day, if I got to get up and speak in front of 150 people, an hour before I start feeling that little butterfly, it's focus on task at hand. You've got a message. You've got a job. They need it. Go do it. It's that external focus tool, and it's a craft. And it's one of my favorite things to be able to give the students so that now when they're going through this stuff during the day, the 120 hours of scenario-based training, what they're doing in the evening when they get on the LMS and they're getting on there asynchronously and they're going on the blog and they're talking about how they use their external focus attention at this point in the scenario to get them through it. So now it's not just this will happen magically. It's here are some tools and build confidence. And I give them the research to read so they don't think that we're just pulling this stuff out of the air and just going, hey, somebody told me this and it works. Here's the research. That's tonight's homework. Go read it. Come back and we'll talk about it in class.
Hey, guys, real quick, sort of just jump in here. I know Scott has to take off. So, Scott, I'm going to cue you up. You can say your goodbyes and then we'll get back into it.
Oh, thanks very much. Just an honor of the fellow instructors and presenters on here. This has been amazing and an honor. And then just to all the students that are listening, I just hope you're taking as many notes as I am and getting, all the passion that kind of we're putting into it. And I think it was said before, but if you look in all the different segments, the different videos that are in the summit, it lists all of our email addresses. So, feel free to reach out for anything we can help you with, and we'll be happy to help you with it. And lastly, for all the police officers watching it, please stay safe. Please stay safe. So it's been great. I'll see you guys a little bit later.
See you, Scott.
See you.
You do amazing stuff too. Pleasure to be on the panel with you.
Thank you, sir. I appreciate it. That's a high honor.
All right. One thing I do want to do here real quickly too, before we completely run out of time and I forget to give a whole bunch of shit away. All the people that answered my question there, I asked everybody who their favorite presenter was so far. Lon, you got a couple votes in there, big guy. The other one, there's a lot for James Hamilton, obviously with Gavin DeBecker and Associates on The Gift of Fear. Again, here's the biggest thing that I want everybody to take away from that for a second. Going into this, everybody knew here's the biggest thing. I got so many emails when Tim Kennedy's episode went out. So many emails said, that is not what I was expecting, but I loved it even more because of what it was. I think what people need to start realizing is that all the high-speed stuff, all the high-speed training is great, but when you talk to the top instructors, it's the why behind the training. It's not the can you do it the fastest, and shoot the best. It's why are we doing the training, and what is the concept behind it, and how do we contextualize that for the student? And when you get a guy like him saying, I want to talk about situational, because I asked him, I said, you have open. He's like, I want to talk situational awareness. That should tell you something about how you should conduct your training and where you should start. And so anyways, I sort of just go on a fucking rabbit hole on that one. Carly, Mark, and Shane, if you're still on here, send me an email. I'm going to give all you guys free all access passes. Thanks you for answering those questions. Everybody else who answered already has all access passes. So thank you guys for chipping in anyways. And Doc, what do you say we give away that one other spot on the de-escalation course?
You've already given one away?
What's that?
You've already given one away?
We gave one away, yeah, at
Okay.
like an hour away. So we have one left. I'm going to leave it up to you. Do you want to ask like a skill testing question? Or I'll let you decide how we're going to set this one up.
So I create the question?
Sure.
Wow. Let's go location again.
Okay.
Where was Force Science Center? And the answer to that was?
Des Plaines, Illinois.
Oh, sorry. That was the first question that we asked.
Okay.
That was the first person that won.
Oh,
I want to win.
okay.
Jason, we're going to give Jason one too.
Okay. So another location question is I taught at Minnesota State University. Won't give you the town. What's a town?
Oh, okay.
I know this one.
So do I.
And I'll give you a clue. It is the place where Laura Ingalls Wilder got her teaching degree. Little House on the Prairie. They went to the big town of?
I think your clue is more confusing than your question.
Oh, I don't know. Those answers getting thrown up in the chat.
Well, let's see. Well, what's that? Who was the first one that got it? I don't know the answer to the question, so I can't answer it.
It looks like maybe Sean Callahan.
Sean? Mankato?
Mankato.
Mankato.
Mankato. She went to Mankato Normal School.
All right. So
Little House on the Prairie.
awesome. So Sean, shoot me an email again. It's adam@iletsummit.com. We'll get you hooked up with Force Science and we'll get you that training brig, guys. So thank you guys all for chipping in and being a part of this. Really one thing too, before we kind of continue on and end off this conversation and kind of just carry it off into the sunset. One thing I do want to push out to everybody who's on this right now is the purpose of this summit is to get this information into the hands of as many officers as humanly possible. We've never seen a summit that's gone out for free with this many world-leading experts. And just so everyone understands, every single person on the summit donated their time, and a lot of their time in some instances to put together these training programs specifically for this for you. And so make sure that when you see this and you're sharing it with all your colleagues, everybody that you can, and just getting the word out as much as possible. Because really that's the purpose of why we put this together. And it's not going to be the last one, but it's definitely the first. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's on here live with us. And obviously thank you to the panel here. I mean, it's always an honor with you guys to get the chance to sit and talk shop. And so yeah, that would just be my call to action for everybody watching this is if every single person on here, there's 84 people live right now still on this 2.5 hours in, 84 people still listening to us talk. If every single one of you told 2 people, and then those people told 2 people, I think we get to thousands and thousands pretty quickly, right? Compound interest. So anyways, I just wanted to push that out there. Yeah, we'll continue on with the conversation. Sorry for cutting everybody off.
Can I take 2 minutes?
Yes.
Because one of the things that I find is empty in academies. And yet everybody has expressed it. Mike was the epitome of this when he was talking about what his students got from their academy experience and how they grew. And one of the Lon clean. That's a good question. One of the real to encapsulate that, it is the psychological, the social and emotional growth of the individual in the academy. And there are ways to do it. And we first encountered this in an academy in Pierce, South Dakota, in which they utilized group work, which had a tremendous benefit on really changing the individual in the academy. And maybe Mike can talk about how he used group work to do that. But Pierre, within a week of starting the academy, put people into small groups and taught them how to work with others and how to assess their interactive interactions with others so that they were constantly, not just physically, but psychologically, emotionally, and socially developing their awareness and their skills. George Thompson said decades ago that one of the best ways to be able to work with others is to put on the right face to be the person you need to be to have the influence you need to have. And how do we teach that? And one of the ways is to teach people how to work effectively in groups and to have them comment and observe on that. And the whole academy process, if we did nothing more than have people work in groups and self-observe on that, or whether they do diaries, or there's a variety of ways of doing that. But learning how to work with others and to be an effective participant with others, because comp work is social. You don't do it by yourself. It is social, and being a social human being and having those skills at a very high level is what is required in this profession. And I don't know an academy that really focuses on that other than a very small number. And we could be doing that across the profession. So I know this is force, but decision-making and maturity, reading other people, putting on the right face to bring about the outcome, I think critical sub-skills to force training.
I think, Doc, the book that we're using by Bradbury, Emotional Intelligence 2.0, and it does have some exercises right in there. And I got that information from, you'd have to help me, but Leslie, her last name is remiss right now, from South Dakota, in the academy out there. I'll get it. It's on the tip of my tongue, but
Me too.
She runs academy out there, and that's a strong component of their academy that we started to try to bring in to Syracuse too. We scratched the surface on it, and we started focusing a little bit more on the group work, squad work. When the COVID came in, it kind of forced that to be. We were actually started doing it before COVID and the breakout rooms and things like that. That we're able to get the recruits to start doing some work after class, giving them their own rooms to go in and take subjects, take topics, and work through that between themselves, and then come up with presentations and be able to kind of explore their own ideas. So that, along with some more reading that we give them, Carl Rogers on active listening. So, when the first time, I'll admit, the first time I heard something about emotional intelligence, I'm like, oh God, what are they pushing down the chain on us now? So no, let me go take a look at what it is. And, this was a few years ago now. And then starting to understand that there's more that we can do, right? There's more that we can do for the recruits than just give them information and help them retain it and help them learn and help them understand and increase tons and tons of scenario-based training. But what about their social skills? There's things that we realized as my instructors and the staff would come to me. It's like, there's a whole world going on in the academy that the staff aren't aware of. As close as you want to be, there's the little clicks and little things, and this person's got this attitude, and somebody's considered an a-hole, but they're a high performer. So it's one of those things. A lot of academies, you can be really competent. You can be really competent in skills and everything else, but don't get along good with your peers. That's a problem. That's going to be a problem. So what can we do about that early on and help that recruit, as they develop, turn into a better listener, a better understanding that, hey, you're good at this, but you're lacking in this area. And this is how we can help you. And those can be done with well-constructed emotional intelligence group work. And I would say that we did a lot of work in it, probably more than a lot of academies did. I wish I had Leslie's name out in South Dakota, but maybe we can get that and put it up on the summit. She's great. I spoke to her a couple of times, and she was picking my brain about what we were doing in the academy, and I kind of turned around and picked her brains as well, because I thought what she was doing was pretty cool and was really something that we could add into to really add into our academy experience.
I'll give you an example. Leslie quotes the stats, and I presume it'll be okay to make that public. But if you look at Aboriginal female, American Indian female, there is, and I don't want to stereotype, but there is usually in the classical environment, the female is subservient to males. And when women enter the academy, they have a real difficult time using force, giving commands to males. And they found that about a third of the Aboriginal females, American Indian females, failed their force course. When they started to introduce group work and the women began to come out of their shell and interact more actively, the failure rate on force went down to 3%. Wow, that's an amazing statistic, where people learn how to reflect what they're doing and their interaction with other people and how to be more effective with other people. Tony, I've never been on a panel with you. It's a pleasure.
Dr. Lewinski, I didn't get the memo, and I'm like, I'm taking my shirt off. I didn't know this was like suit and tie. Wow. I actually just finished teaching a class, guys, and I'm jumping in, and sorry to interrupt, but I'm dripping wet and don't smell good, but I'm sure I'm missing some amazing stuff here.
Good thing it's online.
I'm not wearing any pants.
We don't have to worry.
You guys, none of you are wearing pants, right?
No.
Okay, good. Good.
Doc's got the heart boxers on underneath the desk.
Adam, how are you feeling, man? What an amazing thing you put together.
Thanks, brother. Yeah, it's crazy. I was telling these guys I haven't slept yet this week, but eventually, some point next week, I'll take a minute.
Good for you, man. Good for you. So, what have you guys been talking about?
Oh, geez. Well, who wants to give them the recap?
It take 2.5 hours.
Start at the beginning.
Well, once upon a time. No, I mean, maybe we'll just, Doc, we can just continue on with what you were saying there, because I mean, Tony will be able to jump in just on pretty much any of the stuff we're talking about anyway. So, a lot of it, Tony, is we were talking how it's interesting that we're talking about use of force, and we haven't once discussed one technique. We haven't once discussed it's all the higher level, the why, right? Why are we doing things? How do we teach more effectively? And how do we instill that in students? So that's kind of where we're at.
I dig it, and I couldn't agree more. And one of the things, and I'm sure I shared it when we did our presentation, that in my opinion, after studying violence for 43 years and teaching for 43 years, that the single greatest hindrance to anyone's spontaneity is this idea that it's technique. And I always say, don't confuse technical for tactical. People need to be tactical. They got to move. And I remember getting asked years ago, how important is speed in a fight? And when somebody asks me that, they're usually asking from that defensive tactics, how fast can I move? And I go, no, the speed is all here. How fast can you threat discriminate? How fast can you get out of a fear loop? How fast can you make a decision? What is closest weapon, closest target? What should I be doing here? And most places don't teach, or it's block-based training, and it needs to be brain-based training where Socratically people are taught to make decisions and coach themselves through high-stress situations. So I agree 100%. And listen, in evidence-based training, which is what all training should be, most of the stuff that's taught in the academy, you don't see in violent encounters. So that should just be, if we were watching a football game, I don't know if there's any sports anymore, if that's been canceled too. But in the old days, remember back in the old days when there were sports, if you're watching like a football team and they just started losing all the time, and then you looked at how they were practicing, we, like a scientist, like Dr. Lewinski, Bill could look at that and go, well, this is the game and you're practicing something different. That's why you're losing. I've always said this, it drives me crazy. I go, listen, bad guys attack good guys the same all over the world. So how can your trading academy be boxing biased? How can you be Taekwondo biased? Why are you jiu-jitsu biased? Why are you firearm biased, right? It's you reverse engineer. These are the things bad guys do. And this is how we need to stop them. And how you stop them is always going to be connected to where you are at the moment of that sudden violent encounter. I could be standing here with a gun, ready to go, watch that door. If that door blows open and bad guys come through it, there will still always be a micro flinch, even though I look like I'm ready. I'm always going to be there going, holy shit, there's a micro flinch. Now imagine if I'm not ready to go. There's a major flinch, and this is hijacking executive function. Anyways, don't get me started. Too late.
I think Tony,
his first minute a recap of the last 2.5 hours.
Right. Exactly.
I mean, Tony hit it dead on. We need to be stopped. We need to move away from tactic-based training and more to principle and technique-based training. It's all about learning the whys, learning how to think, learning how to make the best decision based on what you're facing right then. Learn the principles, and the tactics ultimately they're fluid. You do what works.
When I for many years, about 11 years, I was one of the main guys for asymmetric warfare, and they base their outcomes-based training and even their CAT-C shooting program on a lot of our research. And what we would do is we would put people in a confined space problem, and we would say, you need to solve this. How are you going to solve this? And then we would say, how are you going to solve it kinetically? How are you going to solve it with a knife? How are you going to solve it with your hands? How are you going to solve it verbally? And it revealed, like, everyone could do their own AAR, their own, after action. And what it would reveal is I don't know how to do this, and that would have been the skill set I needed here. Very different from, this is how you clear malfunction. I just did I put a video online recently where I had this hawk dummy that grabbed my wrists, and I'm up here with a SIRT pistol, and the dummy's on my wrists, and I'm on there, and I roll around, and I palm strike the dummy in the head here a couple of times, index the head, then I muzzle strike it in the throat, and then immediately come up and contact shoot it. And I describe in the scenario, it's a home invasion. I caught this person like trying to kidnap one of my kids. I drew my weapon. They attacked me. They're clearly trying to kill me. And I'm going through this very violent. I'm off balance. I'm sweating. I'm smashing. I'm moving. And people are commenting, because I didn't do a tap rack. I didn't do like a management, like an SOP, clear after striking with the weapon. And I'm politely saying to people, like, you're not going to clear a jam if there's no jam. Well, there would have been a jam, they're saying. And I'm going like, but you don't know that. Well, no, the gun would have gone out of battery. I go, well, but you don't know that. You don't clear a jam until there's a jam. And this is the difference between like procedural training. You go to the range and people are doing like this. The reason, if I get attacked at close quarter and I got to drag my weapon out and shoot a guy from here, how close is the bad guy? The bad guy's going to be right on top of me. Where is my support hand going to be? When the cross extensor reflex goes out and I got to stop somebody, so if my hand's going to be here, I'm pushing away the threat. I now got to do this. But years ago, somebody probably shot their elbow or shot their thumb off at the range. And this position here, I got a bunch of firearms guys going, this guy's full of shit. A bunch of, this became a safety position on the range, and I get it. But your support hand should never be here if you need to contact shoot somebody. And behaviorally, it'll be out here. You need to practice how to not shoot yourself in the elbow or the hand. And this is to go back to what you were saying, is like when you teach principle, there's like Maslow's hierarchy of needs. The first tier is always going to be the survival reflex. And if you guys Google, I wrote it for Caliber Press when Brian Dalton was stabbed in the neck. You see his hands come up on his body cam, and his hands are outside 90, fingers splayed, and he's pushing the guy away, and then as he finally gets out of there, you see the ticket he was writing float in slow motion down there. That's because the cross extensor reflex locked onto the ticket, and when he finally got caught up to the fact where his limbic system, amygdala, reptilian brain hijacked executive function and has recalibrated his brain, he finally caught up and went, this guy's stabbing me in the neck, I need to shoot him. It took all those seconds, but what kept him alive was his body's survival reflex, what I call the organic airbag of pushing away danger. These are behavioral principles based on neuroscience. That needs to be taught to every person who's within arm's reach of a bad guy. And at that point here, this becomes my workspace. I now clear it. Oh, the guy's trying to kill me. That hand stayed up. He reached down to got his gun out and shot the guy. Anyways, I get a little fired up at this stuff. Sorry for hijacking this, man. But I get so frustrated that because it's not he throws a left hand block, he throws a right hand come under it. That we can't teach cops like that. Bill, you know this. You did that intensive study on Canada, the UK, and the USA, and saw that people aren't getting the training they need to face the violence in the streets they're going to face.
Right. We are teaching what we call teaching objectives, not learning objectives. We want to be able to check a box that we have taught a certain topic and somebody can demonstrate that skill. And as Mike was saying the other day, we have the illusion of learning. Chris Butler was saying the same thing. We have the illusion of learning. We have nothing to do with performance. We have accomplished some sort of standard for an academy, not a professional clinical skill.
I love it.
And, yeah.
How do we fix this? I mean, like an event like yours, Adam, but and like having, leaders in the industry have the same message as a start, but I can't mention it. I was going to tell you that I was going to contact NYPD and my conversations with that, and they were receptive, but they're like, $1 billion budget cut. You can't do this, you can't do this, and morale as low as you can. We could go in there, the six of us can go in there and go, guys, we'll help you fix it. We don't want any money. And they're still like, now's not a good time. But how do we fix this? Is it just, you just keep putting it out there? Any strategies?
Real quick, Tony, before we jump into that, Jason, I know you got to take off, man. I'll let you say your goodbyes and then we'll jump into that question.
Hey, thanks, guys. Thanks, Adam, for the invite. To all of the panel, amazing discussion, a lot of great information. I took a ton of notes. Tony, nice to meet you. And that's been the $1 million question throughout the event tonight is, how do we get this information out to where it needs to be, meaning command staffs, whether it's city councils, city administrators, and actually get buy-in, especially under today's climate. How do we get the buy-in so that we can train law enforcement professionals better? How can we make them better operators insofar as being able? Just the example you gave was phenomenal. That threat response area, and there's no such thing as teaching somebody a 1-2 combination, sweep the legs when it's all going to hell, because we've all seen it and we watch it all the time in videos. It just doesn't take place. So anyway, great time tonight. I'm very fortunate to have been invited, and really enjoyed the company and being with you guys. Thanks very much.
Thanks, man. Good to meet you.
Jason,
Thank you. Amazing to meet you.
I'll be in touch.
Thanks, Doc. Talk to you soon. On. See you guys.
Okay.
Does anybody want to pick up where Jason kind of left off there with Tony's question?
I'll tell you one thing. Not like, I got so fed up with the online defund the police that I started posting. I did 3 posts offering free training for cops. I got 345 cops signing up for free online training.
Tony, so what you're seeing is Tony's just trying to steal my model, and
yeah,
he knows that I'm doing it right, and now he wants to learn from the best. That's what's happening.
Exactly. Thank you, Adam. Yeah, I got a whole bunch of things to say about that, but no, it was what I'm saying is to all of you, you all have your own audience. We all have our own audience. The thing is to plant the seeds, and it's almost like the old Field of Dreams thing. Build it and they will come. 30% of the people of the first responders that attend any of my classes for the last 20 years have always self-funded, because their agency said, no, we got no money, you're not going to that class, or you don't need that. You already took a DT class. You guys,
there was who was it here on the chat earlier? Was it Carly? Carly said that she had to actually take leave to go to a FSI course and then got reprimanded for it.
Oh, Nicole.
Was it Nicole?
Nicole Farisi. Yeah.
Like,
so,
what is with the leadership? I mean, if I were running a department, you can't train too much for this shit. Unless of course it's what you're doing is sucking. But what were you going to say, Bill?
If you look at New York as an example, they spend $2.3 million qualifying with firearms twice a year. We know that qualifying with firearms twice a year is useless. At least they used to. That's a couple of years old. So they spend $2.3 million doing something that they don't know what they get from, and they have no proof of it. And that's really characteristic of a lot of departments, is they do things because, well, I don't know, maybe they have to. But if they could do something a little bit different during that time span and actually not send bullets down range, but just take that time and do some training, it would be much more efficient and would be less expensive. So you can change the paradigm if you really want to. The question is, do you want to? And so many police agencies, this whole profession is stuck in doing the same old.
Mm-hmm. And I believe going forward, Doc, just spinning off that and what Tony said, it seems like the challenges are the things that we always address, and all the problems and all the issues and all the walls that we have to push against. Those are always, that's the language we talk. It's our mantra, because we know those challenges. There are good chiefs out there. I know some myself, and I've worked underneath some that are supporting. And again, the unrealistic expectation of what we need to be proficient at and how much training time that's going to take. And we've talked about that. But the way forward is what we're doing right now, what Adam's put together, and not just kissing Adam's butt, but this is it. You have a collective of instructors here and people here that are thirsty for this knowledge. Like I said, most of the contact I had after my presentation, people didn't want information from me. They wanted my resources. They wanted my bibliographies. What is it that you're looking at? That's refreshing to me. There's young instructors out there that are hanging off of the words that we're talking about right now. And our job is to put this information out there and keep teaching our instructors and point them in the direction that they can go and they can discover what's next, reading that science, understanding that, getting better at being an instructor, getting better at understanding this entire job, context cues, pre-threat indicators, all that, and being able to integrate that into training. They're out there. I believe in them. I believe it's an unstoppable force. Although we always focus on the challenges, we're going to stay in a forward motion. I retired 3 weeks ago, so I have to believe that our people are out there and they're going to keep driving this forward and keep getting better, and just keep growing, man. Just keep growing.
I think to kind of speak to what Dr. Lewinski was asking about, why are we focusing on like firearms training? And I'm a firearms instructor, so I'm not trying to take away from my own business. But it's measurable. You know, when you're an agency administrator and you're trying to justify spending money on training, well, I can spend $2 million on training, and at the end of that training, I have scores. I have holes in paper that I can count. And the more I train, the more holes I get in paper. Versus something like de-escalation training. Well, at the end of that training, what physically do you have to show? And that's hard for a lot of people to understand the value of something when they don't have something physically tangible at the very end of it to say, look at what we did good. And we need to get away from that mindset of something quantitative, holes in paper, versus understanding the value of something. But I think that's why a lot of administrators or a lot of agencies lean towards those kind of things as training, because they get the prize at the end of it.
Mm-hmm. Robert, one of the things that I was thinking about with off-range training was still firearms, but you're not putting expensive bullets downrange. You're building the psychomotor skills. You're just off-range. So much of psychomotor skills in firearms really can be taught without pulling the trigger. So do you do off-range training to build firearm skills, alignment of the sight picture?
Not as much as we should. You know, we try and incorporate it into our academy curriculum at multiple aspects. But no, not to the point where we should be, not even close. We are very block and silo focused,
right?
And we need to get away from that.
See, Tony has a cert gun, and if you had a cert gun and you did a certain number of reps just in driving with that alignment and then the trigger press at the end of the extension, you could really cut down. And if this is your objective, to cut down on the time frame, you would increase the shooting accuracy, but you would significantly diminish the time frame it would take to put that shot down range.
I agree with you. I'm just speaking of maybe why an administrator likes when they say, why do we want it? If we have $2 million, where are we going to get the bang for the buck? Well, I spend $2 million on bullets. I get holes in paper that I can show at the end of it. Versus this over here, I don't get the prize that I can show.
It was. Right. I can add to that point because it's what we're coming up with the summit right now. And so a lot of you guys know this, we've subsidized the cost for agencies. So obviously the individual purchase is going to charity, but what we're doing is we're subsidizing it for agencies. So they just pay the cost of hosting the officer on the platform. So it's just a few dollars a person. I've spoken with agencies and they're like, that sounds great. Do they get a certificate? No. Okay, then we don't want it. All right. How about I give it to you for free? Yeah, unless they're getting a certificate, it's really no good to us.
It's crazy, right?
I'm like, okay, I'm giving you 75 hours. I'm giving you double your yearly training from the best instructors in the world that would cost you tens of thousands of dollars to come and train. The course that Dave Grossman's doing tomorrow, he charges over $10,000 per agency, and he busted out here for free for everybody. And nobody wants it. Like, what does that tell you? Like, it's crazy. It's so funny. The phone calls that I have are so funny to me. It's just because it's exactly what we're talking about here. It's where it's that just cultural mindset. It's like, why, like Robert's saying, why do I need to have that tangible proof that they like? Is the idea not enough?
Yeah, we don't see the value. That's the problem. Is we get so focused on that piece of paper, that certificate, that prize, that physical thing that I can look at, see, touch, but we don't understand. We don't value the training and what we learn from it and what it actually improves. I don't know how to shift that. I don't know how to take an agency and get them to stop looking at the paper, the scores, the numbers, and get them to understand the value. But I think that's part of the problem.
You know, if that's the problem, we should be a booming success, because we've got our 300-hour specialist course. By the way, retroactively is now available, not just because of a certificate we provide, but you can get 3 graduate credits, you can get 6 undergraduate credits, and you can get 50 hours of ILET post-academy credits for our advanced specialist course. So if you guys want something besides a diploma, we can give you graduate credit, undergraduate credit, all from for science with our advanced specialist course. And it's a hell of a tough course. Right, Lon? Okay. It's a hell of a tough course in which you read the research and talk to the people that's done the research and the top people in the world in that area. So it's kind of cool.
I haven't taken my advanced specialist course there, Bill. So is that a free invite for me to come down and take it then? Is that what you're saying?
We got to talk.
All right. Sounds good. I'll take that. We have, so we're technically at our 3 hours. It was a guideline. Yeah, I'm here. I'm cool to sit and continue this conversation if you guys are. I mean, I'm under no time crunch. I'm going to not sleep again anyway. So, I mean, is there anything we've just touched on here with the requirement for that tangible proof, the certificates? Is that something that we're going to be able to change, or is that not? Like, is that here to stay? And a
lot of times those are state standards, though. You know what I mean? The state mandates or whatever governing agency to maintain your certification, you have to have X amount of hours of continuing education or X amount of hours of proficiency skill. And to prove that I have those hours, got to have my piece of paper. And those are typically state level requirements. Unfortunately, most of those requirements doesn't speak to the quality of the training, just that you have to have a little piece of paper to prove that you win.
Well, I mean, I think, and this is going to get into a lot deeper conversation, because you take that very first session that I did with Dr. Tracy Kazee, right? One of the things that's come out that I've gotten a lot of phone calls, and I'm sure you guys have too, is, hey, can you guys facilitate some type of racial bias, implicit bias training for our department? No, like, we're past that. Like, the 2-hour PowerPoint presentation on racial or implicit bias isn't going to help you. What you need to do is actually go out and speak to the members of your community and create that relationship. That's what you need. And so, I mean, I understand that it comes from a higher level, whether it's state regulated or federally regulated, but at what point do we make the change? If we know it's broken, right? And I guess this is the existential question that no one's going to be able to answer, but if you know it's broken, why do we still do it?
What's amazing to me is we pay a hell of a price in civil suits because it is broken.
Yep.
The pocket that pays for academy training doesn't talk to the pocket that pays out all that civil suit. It's really interesting. If we could get those two pockets of money talking to each other, we may have the possibility for a change. But departments will cut funding, and the first thing they cut is training. But the municipality will pay buku bucks in civil suits because of the loss of academy training. It really doesn't make sense to me. Maybe I'm thinking about it too simply, but it's absolutely amazing. part of why we are so disliked by plaintiffs' attorneys who say all sorts of bad things about us is because our research has blocked plaintiffs' dollars by not just millions, but tens and tens of millions of dollars just to specific agencies. And they hate us, but not a single penny we have saved. Any municipality, whether it's LA or San Francisco or Oakland or anybody, has gone back into training. Not a single penny. And it's that's not been the focus of our research. Our research just incidentally happens to help other people understand the dynamics of force. And so it challenges plaintiffs, and there's irrational theories in some case about why something happened. We bring the science in, or somebody brings our science in, and it influences how a decision is made. And now people are mad at us. But the point I'm making is no matter how much people save, nothing goes into training. No matter how much they lose, nothing changes in training. It's like those two pockets don't talk to each other.
I would be really curious to see if there's somewhere out there that there's a study that correlates as the funding in training decreases, that the expenditure in civil suits increases, and if that's a corresponding, value.
New York is going to be a great study.
Well, let's. You know what? I promised Lon next time we jumped on a call, we'd talk about it because he gets caught in his shoes.
Guys, Adam, I just want to throw in here, if anyone wants, we put together, this is going back over 12 years, maybe longer, a course for Dorset Police in the United Kingdom. It was their lead DT guy. He's a supervisor now, but he put together based on this universal flinch theory and what I talk about as the body's organic airbag. This idea of changing interview postures from something like this to something that is more congruent with de-escalation. We were using the term de-escalation in the 90s, it's not like a buzzword. And it was this idea that the way you talk, because body language is 60% of communication, but the way you talk and the way you gesture should be congruent. That I shouldn't be maybe indexing a gun going, listen, everything's okay, stay calm, because that's also body language for on your mark, get set, go. And you see guys do it. Untrained guys are like, hey man, I don't want to fight, and they're one hand's balled up. I don't want to hit you, man. But their body language in the heat of the moment is suggesting something else. So we put together this course that changed interview postures and went from the steeple position or indexing the gun, and everyone fought it. No, we need it, and they don't have guns there, of course, but they had, aerosol, and they're what they call batons. I don't know what a baton is, but it's a joke, guys. It's their batons. But so we introduced that. We had a program on what we call choice speech and de-escalation that created conscience and accountability. So this was like verbal judo on steroids in terms of understanding the nuances in what inspires and moves people. And then the biggest thing we taught them were two moves, finger splayed outside 90, that when you flinch and the cross extensor fires to push away danger, that if your hands are down here indexing, maybe you just do that and you got sucker punched. But if your hands were up gesturing, and we tied this to a whole bunch of kinesthetic concepts, that your fast twitch muscle fibers are moving, therefore you're breathing more, your shoulders are looser. So I'd be talking to somebody, I understand you're upset, sir. Well, here's the thing. Oh shit, he just moved on you. Those hands come up, you deploy the airbag, that knocks the person back, which puts the defender, the police officer, and I would say like every fight's dangerous, but the most dangerous fight is the ambush. But I'm here like this, I push the suspect back. I am now in a much more tactical position. I can transition to my kit. I'm not peeling backwards. We put this course together for them. It was 6 hours long to go through it. This included PowerPoint, drilling, Socratic drills, role-playing. They did a 9-year study, and I'll get it to any of you and anyone else who's active duty listening to this, a 9-year study that saw a reduction, a 41% reduction of head trauma and a 29% reduction in use of force complaints against the Dorset police consistently for 9 years. We got frickin' spreadsheets. I hate spreadsheets. They showed me spreadsheets. I was like, okay, I believe you. I don't need to see anymore. Where they catalog every single incident. But, you know, why I brought this up is, you know, we're talking about stats, data, and holes in paper and measurements. I can put you in touch with Danny Tamblin. He was the DT guy at the time. Now he's a supervisor there. You guys can interview him. How did you measure that? How did you check that? He can get you the stuff. But it was like, if I told you that you could reduce, look at the narrative that would change. If we had a 29% reduction in use of force complaints, like, what's the algorithm that figures out how much does that save that agency? Because if you reduce head trauma by 41%, you reduce the immediate follow-on violence that would have occurred with a cop getting punched in the face. It's pretty exciting, but, you know, we're talking about how do we make this change? It was, and this comes back to your audience, Adam, and so I'm imploring all of you, no champion, no chance, no champion, no chance. You have access to, you know, whether it's Tim Kennedy or Dave Grossman or Bill Lewinski and you know, all of the other people that you had on here, people who have studied this stuff for decades, and this is their calling. You have access to that. But if you're not going to be the individual to make the change in your family, your community, you're like Danny Tamblin made that change. 9 years straight did that. And listen, it doesn't make me any money. This isn't about, Spear. He would come back every time we would train. So he went to 5 courses. You know, he paid the week-long thing. He brought it back to his agency. But what he did is he saw a behavioral gap in the capacity to make defensive tactics 3-dimensional and brain-based. And really, so the answer is, somebody listening to this needs to go, I am the guy, I am the gal that is going to do this now. And I'm going to source this stuff, and I'm going to start building a program that makes my officers or my firefighters or my, you know, whoever's listening to this, my personnel, my team, my colleagues safer sooner.
Yeah. Well, I definitely think there's going to be the passing of the torch, right? Especially from the older generation, like some of you folks on this panel. And then
whoa.
Generation.
Jesus. The things, you know what? This is proof that the things that people say, like when they're online, that they won't say to your face, right?
Right. You know,
like you old guys on the panel.
I text you.
So, guys, I do have to go. It's been an honor to share the stage with you guys.
Absolutely.
It really has. And Tony, great to meet you. Lon, be in touch. Mike,
Doc.
Robert, have a good evening.
It's been an honor.
Yeah.
Take care. Thanks
Pleasure.
for all the amazing work you do with your team as well, Bill.
You too. And Adam, thank you for the opportunity to be here. And we will talk. Okay.
Thanks, Doc. Really appreciate it.
Okay, great. Thanks, guys.
All right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Adam, I'm going to have to roll too. The wife is texting me going, dinner is ready.
It's all good. My wife left for the week. She figured me doing computer stuff.
Well, you think she is not back yet. You don't know if she only left for the week.
No, she just left today. Like she literally just took
I'm
off.
just saying you don't know if she's coming back is what I'm saying.
Well, hey, listen.
After this week.
I don't stress myself out with that kind of stuff, man. I just do one thing at a time.
Stay focused.
You have a call on you. I'm going to roll too. Hey, listen, I got to roll too. It was so meeting you, Mike. I wanted to hear you play piano, but
Love my green screen, huh?
you'll do that another time. Yeah. Adam, again, congratulations on an amazing thing. Lon, good to see you again. Robert, nice to meet you.
Honor to meet you there, Tony.
And guys, let's stay in touch even after this thing. Let's get maybe an email list. You know, a bunch of people probably won't answer, but I will. You know, there's gonna be a membership. We're gonna put something together, a network for just the instructors on the panel, for information sharing and stuff like that. So that's already in the plans. So, thanks, Tony. Appreciate it. I guess we'll be safe. Take care, everybody.
See you, man. We're over time here, so we'll just say our goodbyes. I don't know if you guys are all seeing the same screen. Lon, I'll start with you, and we'll just kind of go clockwise around, and then we'll just leave the everybody listening to this off with a few words, and then we'll shut her down.
All right.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. Appreciate the opportunity to come out. I've had a bunch of people reach out through LinkedIn and some other stuff. I think we need to put together like a master book list. As far as suggested reading list, I got multiple requests on that, and kind of go from there. But Adam, great job. Thank you, Mike, Robert. Absolute pleasure on both of you, and looking forward to next time.
Absolutely. Yeah, go ahead. Yeah, go ahead, Mike. You guys stick around too. When we shut the broadcast off, we'll have a quick AAR here.
Okay.
Yeah, I got the dog. Your dog got my dog barking. Oh, nice job. Yeah, that's synchronous learning right there. Again, Adam, thanks. Awesome. I like to leave a challenge for the listeners. The people that are listening to this right now. And again, it's such an honor to sit back and listen to everyone. And I'm taking copious notes here and everything, but I always go back that, man, we just connect so well with our shared frustrations, right? We beat the drums of our tribe, and that's one thing that we always identify with. And then, we're going to work really hard, especially folks like me that just retired. And it's like, we know that law enforcement's going through tough times right now and challenges, and it's our way of staying connected and trying to do something that has purpose that people can use to go forward. But here's my challenge to the folks out there. As we beat the drums to the frustrations and the challenges all the way around us, ask yourself this question. Have you maximized everything that you could do within your parameters? Have you understood, just like we talk about, and Tim Kennedy talks about going back, and it's about taking care of yourself. Yeah, I'm going to go, the I, the we, the it. I got to go work out. I'm going to go read. I'm going to go do this and do that. So it's up to me to make myself the best person I can be for my family, and then therefore for my community and everything else. I ask you this and I challenge you. Have you done everything you can, not just here, but in your training? So when it comes to training, you identified your parameters. We complained about the walls. Have you done everything that you could do? One saying that I always really liked, and I always have to remind myself when I start complaining about things, it's like, look in the mirror before you look out the window, because those parameters are going to be there, and they're going to move slowly. But while you have that operating space, have you identified it? Have you got with your people, and have you made them the best they could be? Support them as much as you can. If you're in a leadership position, man, do it. And again, if there's anything that I can do as far as like things that I've done at the academy where I've identified some walls, and it's like, if you ain't cheating, you ain't trying. I have a plaque that says that on me. And I don't mean it in a morally bad way, but you got to try to be innovative and creative and use the time that you have to do things the best that you can do. So while we're sitting here all frustrated about what's going on, don't waste any time. Don't let too much water get under the bridge. Get after it. Go out there, read that next book, go do that next thing. Help your instructors, keep moving forward as best you can. So trying to end on a positive note, guys, it's been fantastic. Thanks for having me here, and appreciate being a part of this whole thing, Adam. It really has been a true honor.
Anytime, brother.
All right. Guess I'll end it off. Adam, obviously, as you know, thank you so much, for the opportunity to participate in all of this, the ability to sit here and interact and be on panels with people that I've spent my career studying and learning from, to now be side by side with them is a tremendous opportunity. And I'm going to kind of take a cue from Mike here with his challenge. Throughout this whole couple hours we've been talking about our frustrations. We've been talking about the leadership and all the things that are the obstacles to trying to get the changes in that we want. What I encourage, what I challenge everybody that's listening to this, you be that change. There's always going to be an excuse. There's always going to be a reason of why it can't get done. Be the change that gets it done. Don't be the person that sits there and settles for just that simple no. Do the research, get the information, make it happen. I promise you, every single person that's part of this summit, that's on these panels, myself, everybody that's in here, that's how we got where we were. We didn't take that no for an answer. That's what you have to do. You want to be the change, get yourself into that position. Don't take no for an answer. Find the ways to make it work. And if there's anything that I or anybody else that's been a part of this can do. My contact info is in my bio. It's on everything for my session. Reach out to me 24/7. There's nothing I won't do for a fellow brother or sister, in law enforcement, military, or just any first responder level. We're all in this together. And I want to thank everybody that's taken time out of their schedules to take that proactive approach and learn and take a part of this.
Awesome. Well, gentlemen, as always, it's always an honor and a privilege. And I every time I get a chance, I tell this to people that don't believe me. Like, I literally have probably the best job in the world, where I get to sit and have one-on-one conversations or group conversations with like-minded people. Not too many people in the world get to do that and enjoy everything they do. So thank you guys for that. And thank you to everybody who's watching this, who's still with us. There's over 50 people who are still sitting through it. You guys are troopers. If you don't already have an all access pass, do I have one set up? I'm thinking if I have a coupon code. Hang on a second. Let me check for you. I'm going to give you a coupon code to use. I'll make one up. Use Lon, Rob, Mike. Okay. So here, I'm going to type it in the thing. We're going to give you a coupon code. You're going to save 50% off the all access pass. Only for till midnight, though. So you really have just a few hours. I'll type it into the... That's going to be the coupon code. As soon as we're off here, it'll go live. Use it. You'll save 50% if you want the all access pass. Share it with whoever you want. It's only going to be good for 2 hours and fucking 38 minutes. I didn't feel like I didn't give enough stuff away today. That's what I felt like. So, all right, guys, thank you so much. Thank you for everybody who joined us. I hope you enjoyed the rest of the summit. Tomorrow is the biggest day yet. There's a lot of very long sessions, so strap in and enjoy. Thank you guys so much for being here. Appreciate it.